Recommendations from officers and the amendment have both been moved and seconded, but now is the opportunity for questions of officers of either. I'd come back to the question that I had initially, and that is for those that are very keen to get settlement and get on with their lives, is there a difficulty with the proportionate approach if the estimates are over budget that you would not be able to settle the first case until you settled the last? And the reason is that until the valuation on all of the properties were resolved, you would not be able to calculate what portion of the 95% you would be paying out.
So through the chair, just a point of clarification with regarding the budgets. We were made aware quite recently that potentially GST may be excluded from our budget. So at the moment, but this is quite new information. So at the moment, we are working on the basis that potentially we have included GST in our numbers. So the way we're sitting with our finances to date is that if we are operating at the 95% for all properties, we would, if you include GST, we would be potentially over that 12 million cap. And I'm just going to verify that if GST was excluded, where do we sit within that number there as well? But to answer your other question, if we do go over that 12 million cap, we need to, it would stop us from being able to process quickly any applications. We would need to wait for all applications to come in in order to move quickly.
Can I just ask a further supplementary on the GST issue that you've just brought to our attention? I would be supportive of Councillor Sanson's amendment if I was quite sure that there was a GST benefit and we get everybody in. Partly because we're getting the 50% government subsidy, and partly because I'm really keen to get these matters resolved so our community can move on. Is the GST question mark that is outstanding likely to be beneficial or negative to the capacity to meet the 12 million cap?
It would be beneficial. So we would, it gives us a better chance of coming in under the cap.
Can then I ask the further supplementary, how long will it take you to clarify the GST issue? Because in the event that the GST issue is in favour, then I as Mayor would like to support Councillor Sanson. In the event that the GST is not favourable, then I'm more nervous because of the way that will complicate the scheme. How long would it take you to be able to resolve the GST issue?
If you give me 15 minutes, we'll be able to come back with...
I'm sorry that this is a messy start to the day. I think that piece of information is material to us resolving it. I would like to move to the next item and get our officials the opportunity. Is there any objection from council officials to getting clarity on that prior to us moving forward? That being the case, I'm going to let those motions lie on the table and we'll move to resolution 4. Is there any council that objects to me taking that course of action? Councillor Pakipaki.
I had a question that might actually give the officers a chance to have a think about it. I just wanted to know whether or not that within this framework that we're working, do we have a facility available to us that can be applied across all of the properties to actually meet that $12 million cap, depending on both circumstances, that can be a percentage, equal percentage, proportionate percentage of each of those property valuations to bring it down, or are we committed to this one course of action?
The only difficulty I have, Councillor Pakipaki, is the officers that were able to clarify are off getting the GST. It's a pertinent question. I'd like to postpone that question until our off. Hang on.
Sorry, apologies there. Please, could you repeat the question?
Councillor Pakipaki, would you like to repeat the question, please?
So within what we're working with at the moment, is there a facility available that we can apply across all of these properties once the final numbers are reached, that if we extend beyond the cap, that amount can be proportionately applied as a reduction to all of the properties. So without knowing GST, no GST, the fluctuation of valuations will sort of allow us to be able to stay within that $12 million cap.
So through the chair, so effectively we were waiting for all offers to come in.
Apologies, I didn't have my microphone on.
We'd be waiting for all offers to come in to make an assessment of where everything, we've got to wait for the EQC payouts and all of those other aspects to come in to fully understand the situation. And then once that's understood, we would then have a good handle on knowing how we can apportion the money.
So I guess the question is, at this stage of the process, do we need to enable that as an option later on, or can we visit it down the track when we do have all that information at hand?
So through the chair, so I think at the moment we're saying up to a maximum of 95%. So maximum. So it's not a set 95, it's up to a maximum. So once we've got that information in, we can adjust it to suit.
I've got a further comment from Nikki in response to Councillor Paki's questions, then I'll come to Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, through the chair. If I understand the question, it's looking at how we can make the most use of the 12 million in a time of uncertainty now. I think we could achieve that, but we would need a bit of rewording of the principles in order to allow that mechanism that you are discussing. So we could certainly come back with a little revision tomorrow that would make that possible.
I'm not just being my first time in this process, and also having this example, I wasn't too sure whether or not that is this the train on tracks once we enable this, and there's no other options for us later. If there are other options, then I'm perfectly happy.
Here's how I'd like to proceed. I'll take my view is both the questions that have been asked by Councillor Paki and the question mark over GST is I don't want officers being rushed. It's very important from my perspective that council does the sensitive exercise that have a big impact on people's lives well. On that basis, I don't want you being rushed in your work. I'd like to postpone this item first on the agenda tomorrow morning when we have that information. And then I think we've got a greater degree of certainty of getting it correct. And that may involve revised recommendations. Can I just check with councillors? If the GST gives us a benefit and the opportunity of wanting this thing resolved quickly, I think that's the broad objectives that we are looking for in the discussion that we've had. And if officers want to come back with the recommendations that was different to those that were there with that new information, I'm assuming councillors will be comfortable with that. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Nick. I think there's a couple of principles that I think are important. The $12 million cap.
Yes.
So I'm really interested in the proportional approach, which Kahu's talked about, which you've mentioned, Nick, and which Nikki referenced, and ensuring that our buyout principles reflect a proportional approach so that we don't exceed the $12 million cap. That's, I think that's
an important objective, and the other important objective for me, and a practical mechanism that will enable families to be able to move on as quickly as possible. If we could just get a bit more advice on those couple of points, then I think we can settle this issue better. All right, so that item will be the first item on the agenda tomorrow morning at 9, just to give us time to get that information accurate. GST around land transactions is complicated. You've got the extra complexity of how the GST relates for the funding that's provided from government, and I don't want mistakes being made given the sums of money involved. Thank you. We move to item 3, the council's approach to forestry. The recommendation from officers is that council approves option 2 as set out in the long-term plan. Is there a council that's prepared to move the adoption? Councillor Sanson is moving. Is there a seconder for the resolution?
Happy to second.
Happy to second from the Deputy Mayor. The report and recommendation on item 4 is now open for questions from colleagues. Councillor Skinner.
Cool, just for public's benefit, etc., and ours, the cost of moving out of forestry and replanting, what's the sort of cost impact for that? Well, that's a simplistic question with a lot of machinations, but.
So through the chair, over the course of this 10-year LTP, the additional funding required will be $10.4 million.
So roughly $1 million a year. Thank you. Which is approximately 1% rates.
Through the chair, one of the recommendations from the task force that was subsequently adopted by council was that we explore alternative funding sources.
Yep.
To fund the transition. So there may be some offset to those costs through alternative sources yet to be explored.
Thank you.
Councillor Sanson.
Actually, I'm still trying to find the data for my question. So if anyone else has a question, could you come back to me? And if not, I'll just fudge it.
I fudge it all the time. I'll take the lead from the chair. Are there any other questions? Have a crack at fudging it.
Okay, thanks. In reading the task force report, and in particular the report that was authored by the forestry expert, Stuart Orme, I understand that he framed the costs of status quo as being somewhere in the vicinity of $10 million also. And I'm just wondering whether staff can comment that it is their understanding that the status quo approach also has a significant cost. And yeah.
An important question, and I think it's important in council considering this change of approach that we're clear on the costings.
Through the chair, so the assessment that was undertaken indicated that the $10.4 million would be on top of if we remained status quo. So if we continued on in commercial forestry, that was the estimated cost, and this cost is on top of the existing, what we expected if we stayed status quo.
Is the 10.4 million estimate of the cost of changing our forestry approach consistent with the estimates that were produced by the Forestry Task Force?
Through the chair, that's correct. So we use those as a basis of these our estimates. Obviously, this is a very new area for council. It's a very new area in general through New Zealand to look at transitioning blocks from commercial forestry into alternative species. And so we relied heavily on the numbers that were provided in the task force report to try and generate estimates.
Thank you. Any other questions? This item has been moved by Councillor Sanson. It's been seconded by the Deputy Mayor. It is now open for debate. If there is no debate, sorry, Councillor Skinner.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's.
Can I just to be fair to my standing orders, it is normally that when we begin the debate that the mover has the first opportunity to speak, and if Councillor Sanson wished to exercise that, I would give her that opportunity.
Thanks. I'd like right of reply. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner. Floor's yours.
Thank you for that. This is obviously there's lots of pros and cons in whatever you do, and on this one I'm very conscious, and I think it's great that we're always trying to improve, especially the backdrop of our city and the well-being of our land. This situation is a costly one, and often those gains aren't as environmentally achieved as or quickly as may be perceived. I've been a big supporter of us protecting our existing forests where we've got the full canopies of our native forests, and it concerns me that we've cut budget or delayed budget on protecting those, and those are like a infrastructure that protects us from heavy rains. And I commend that we're trying to, whatever we do with our forests, if we remove exotic or native, that we're trying to get them to grow as quickly as possible. Us removing the forestry comes at great expense if we're trying to replant it in natives. And that's bearing upon us on the $10 million cost. So what I do ask is that we do it in a very stepped manner, and I think that is part of that plan. But I have concern that this idea of just removing the forestry is going to somehow protect the land in a short term. Long term, there'll be some gains, but as you've seen with those heavy rains we've had, whether it's exotic or natives, they all get hit just alike. And that was shown very clear in the Marlborough investigation, and it was over vast areas of land, and it was shown very clearly that whether it be native or exotic, more what had effect wasn't really the disturbance of the land for roads, etc., or construction. But as much as I support this, it saddens me that we're not really taking care of the full canopies forests we've got to the degree I believe we should be doing and that we had started last term. I'd rather see that $10 million or $1 million, at least the first $1 million put into kickstarting that, protecting our existing forests. The other concern is the great impact on the ratepayer on this. And I think it should be more of a slower process, a piece by piece, remove ways of going, as we've done up Marsden Valley, as we've done up the Brook Valley in those areas. And I think it's been quite right. And as we've done on the Grampians here, step by step, as they've come to the end of their harvest, we look to let regrowth happen there. So no, I can't support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, I am very happy to speak in support of this. I think it's great that we went out and asked the community for their views. We presented the costs. I did hear some concern from the task force, the external task force members themselves, that they felt the cost presented in our LTP document didn't accurately reflect the costs of the status quo. So even if this cost of the status quo were not accurately reflected in the LTP, we can still take confidence that the community opted, 80% of the community who's responded have opted for the transition. And I think that that gives us a really strong mandate. We know that it's going to be, a multi-year transition. And I just look forward to watching and hopefully supporting that transition and the, benefits biodiversity-wise, recreational access-wise, and resilience-wise for our community. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. I think what we're seeing with this consultation and generally in public discussion is that there is an increasing understanding that to engage in clear foul exotic forestry on steep slopes and sensitive catchments is simply a mistake, because the costs are too high to bear, and most of those costs are externalised to the environment. So we end up seeing sedimentation in our waterways and degraded aquatic life, and then into the shallow marine environment. We see slope instability and soil erosion and steeper flood peaks because the runoff is higher. So then the question is, what do we do about that? And I think the task force has done a great job at looking at that problem. And there's a cost to bear, but the cost of doing nothing and continuing with those harmful practices is the greater cost to bear, I believe. So fully support this resolution, and I look forward to having a coherent forestry, Indigenous forestry policy and area throughout our catchments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stella. The floor is the Deputy Mayor's.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a very exciting day, all things considered. Looking back on the history of this in my own time on council, or going further back to 1978 when a local bill was passed to enable Nelson City Council to get into commercial forestry, despite the prohibitions of the Municipal Corporations Act 1954. This has a long storied history, Nelson City Council's role in forestry. And when that bill was put forward, it was quite ambitiously suggesting that we could funnel this green gold and the proceeds of it into our recreational facilities in the region. That didn't come to pass, but actually right now is the decision when it can. This is about taking a common sense step forward to both improve our environmental outcomes, but also improve our recreational outcomes, which was the intention when we first got into this game. We're finally realizing those aspirations just a little later than perhaps we could have or should have. I really do want to acknowledge Councillor Sanson's immense mahi over the past 5 years. It has been a massive slog. We've had some very entertaining debates and some quite infuriating ones as well. And I want to acknowledge the work of the task force that has brought this into a space where we can finally start moving forward in a way that actually clearly has the support of our community and that is going to deliver significantly better outcomes than the status quo. And I do also want to acknowledge the huge work behind the scenes of council staff. I know some of those debates were even more infuriating for them, but it wouldn't have been possible to get to this point without their support as well. And so I really think that this is an opportunity that will be looked back on in the same way I look back on that 1978 decision as a key turning point for the management of a significant chunk of land in this region, and one that will be viewed in an incredibly positive light 50 years from now.
In my contribution on this item, would firstly note that it is a very significant change in our long-term plan, and of the issues that we are debating, in my view, it is one of the most substantial. It has been an issue that has caused, particularly in the previous council, quite a level of contention. I firstly want to advocate that the process that we have been about in setting this change of direction, in my view, has been both professional and inclusive. If you're going to make big change, you need good process. And I wish to acknowledge, as the Deputy Mayor has, all the members of the task force that, in my view, on a complex issue, did a good piece of work. The first substantive view I take is that it is not the core business of councils to be involved in commercial forestry. There is a very important forestry sector for this region. We have all sorts of challenges for our chief executive and staff. Being a commercial forestry company, in my view, is not one of the core functions of council. If you look back at the history, there was a view that this was going to be a very profitable activity and commercial for council. I take the thorough examination of the issue by the task force was, in fact, the council has delivered very little net financial gains from being in the commercial forestry business. I think the second big change is that as Nelson has grown, the space in the immediate vicinity of the city has, in my view, far greater value for amenity and recreation than it does being in the commercial forestry business. Our city is beautiful in the backdrop that we have, and in my view, this change of direction is about understanding both that amenity and that recreational opportunity. I think one of the most interesting challenges in that task force report, which is a further discussion for us to have, is not about the 600 hectares, relatively small area of commercial forestry, but how we can be better custodians of that very large 8,000 hectare of forestry estate. There were moments last year through the previous government's Three Waters reform that there were proposals to take much of that off us. That's not now happening. I do think in the going forward with the long-term plan, we've got a second challenge as to how we better manage that 8,000 hectares. The last point I want to note on this item is I think there is still uncertainty about the costs of the conversion from commercial forestry as it is progressively harvested over to the mixed species. And I just flagged that there are different professional opinions that have come through. It is a new area. It is one of which this is going to be a little bit of what I call adaptive management. And that is, as the council has areas that are harvested, looks to introduce those mixed species and the continuous canopy, that we become better informed about the costs as we make the decisions going forward. So I'm happy to support the significant change in council's approach to forestry. I think both from a financial point of view for council, as well as in terms of the amenity and the environmental recreational elements, it is the right change for us to make. But having made the change in direction, there will be still more work for both staff and council to consider as we manage the transition. Sometimes we underestimate the amount of time when you're dealing with a forest crop that's 30 years This isn't going to be a sudden change. It is going to be a gradual one as this long-term plan is implemented. Any other contributions? Would the mover like to exercise the right of reply?
No, but thanks everybody in advance for your support, for those who feel able to.
Nice.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no.
No.
That is carried. Now, I've been advised that we've been able to sort our streaming problem, but we need to take a break. Because we've had a little bit of disruption over our first hour into business, it's my intention to reconvene at 10:10 in 4 minutes' time, at which time we'll be live streaming. Council's adjourned.
Need to just check what we're going to the buyouts. My understanding is what says what to achieve is to get the home owners paid out at 95.
I just quickly say from the perspective as mayor, that a tremendous amount of work done by the previous council on the Marina Master Plan. And this is an important step that we are taking to give us the tools and the machinery to be able to implement it and support the work that's been done. Advise members, both current and previous councillors that did the work on the master plan and now looking forward to the next stages working with the Marina Company. Would you like to exercise your right of reply, Councillor Brand?
Yeah, just to add to that, because there has been a tremendous amount of fantastic work finally to get this through last term, because it has dragged on for many terms prior to that. So to actually see this moving towards a resolution is quite productive, not only for council but also for the huge amount of public that engaged in the process. So yeah, it's been a joint effort through the community as well as the council, and yeah, that should be acknowledged. So woohoo, bring on the next steps and let's get this flourishing.
I want the woohoo in the minutes, please. Thank you all. I'll put the resolution number 5. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, say no. Carried. We come to items 6 and 7 with respect to the housing reserve changes. There has been an amendment that has been circulated from Councillor Sanson. Is someone prepared to move the substantive? You can't move the amendment, I'm sorry, Rachel, if you move the substantive motion. So to help you, I'll move the substantive motion. Yep. Councillor Pakipaki is to second, and I'm going to take Councillor Sanson moving her amendment and the Deputy Mayor seconding it.
Sure.
And we can now have questions of our officers, starting with Councillor Brand.
Thank you. My question is, we had the presentation submission from MP Rachel Boyack and about the intent of how this was originally set up, and does this change the intent of the original setup of the proposal from last term to this term?
Thanks, Vandy.
So through the chair, it does, but the task force has already been, the terms of reference have already been expanded to cover this topic.
Councillor Sanson, any questions?
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Kia ora, Mandy. I just wanted to check if staff are comfortable with the amended wording and comfortable that it aligns with the broadened mandate of the task force.
Through the chair, yes, staff are comfortable with the proposed amendments.
Any further questions? Councillor Courtney?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Nick. Through to Officer Mandy. Can you refresh our memories and remind us of the level of the fund is at the moment, the reserve, housing reserve fund is at?
Through the chair, I think it's around 3 million. The chair of the task force might be able to help.
Thank you. I'm happy.
You're happy? If there are no further questions, we'll then move to the debate, and I think it's appropriate that we first debate the amendment. Councillor Sanson.
Just signalling that I'd like to have right of reply, please, once everyone else has debated.
Sure. The only thing I would say in the way in which we're managing the day for those that are moving motions is, and I don't want to be a pain, I want things to be as relaxed and collegial as possible, is technically speaking, the right of reply is not to raise new matters. It's only to respond. So if movers are surrendering their right to only speak as a right of reply, they must understand that they can't bring new matters in. They can only respond to matters that have been raised by other colleagues. But I'm not going to be a pain. Councillor Skinner?
Just for process and clarity, I see we're calling them amendments, but they're not exactly, they're amendments. It's changing the original recommendation. If it's an amendment, you'd vote to receive the recommendation, then someone would say, I want an amendment to that. Then you'd debate and vote for the amendment, and if it's won or lost, it would then refer back, if it was lost, for example, refer back to the substantive. We seem to have amendments on for each of these, but they're really just changing what the original recommendation was. Seems a little bit out of character.
My normal process is that you have a motion and then you have amendments that are moved and seconded. That's my intention to proceed on that basis, and the opportunity at the moment is to debate the amendment to the staff recommendation. The only comment I'd make is I'm very relaxed about the wording, but it is my intent behind the Housing Reserve Fund for this extra scope to focus on what I call the hard end of the housing challenge. That is, I am concerned about those people that are homeless. I am a strong supporter of the work that is being done by Housing First in our community, but I'm not satisfied that we've got all of the solution. Even yesterday in speaking to the Mayor of Christchurch, we are not the only city that is experiencing those relatively small number of people who are effectively living in our streets. I'm happy to support the amendment as long as we're quite clear that it's in that hard end that the ultimate focus is. The reason I make that point is around the issue of housing. The expenditure on it at a central government level is truly massive. Billions and billions of dollars are paid in accommodation supplements, in the social housing dividend, and any things that we do through the Housing Reserve Fund need to be niche, need to be innovative, and around some specific aspects of it, because with the amount of money that's in the Housing Reserve, if you try and deal with the whole issue, my view is that you're more likely to hit none of the targets. So I'm indicating support for the amendment, albeit the intent I'm looking behind this piece of work is to help resolve that very high need area of the housing challenge our community has. The Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, and very happy to support this. I'll go nice and broad so that Rachel has plenty to respond to it in a right of reply. Firstly, just a brief note on procedural matters, which is we do equally have the opportunity to move these motions as just substituted to the staff recommendation. If that is an option we want to consider in future, should there be broad support for the amendments. But that is very tangential to the matter.
The Deputy Mayor helping to get the Mayor, who's still got his training wheels, onto the straight and narrow and advice taken.
I think these are important wording changes, and I advocated for the inclusion of the word enduring, particularly in the resolution itself, whilst it is noted in the staff report. I actually think that this changes the proposal that we went out with slightly, in that I don't view this as being a massive step away from the purpose that was agreed to when the Housing Reserve was established, which was to work with and support partners who have the ability to deliver social and affordable housing solutions for the community. Let's be clear, this is about delivering housing solutions, social housing solutions in its broadest terminology. And it is about our stewardship role with this fund to make sure that we are patching the gaps that have been left in our community by inaction and by wider systemic challenges that we have both in this region and across our country. It is really important that we use every lever that we have to address the issues present. And as much as the previous work we've done has been about actually addressing homelessness as well, because the key thing to address in addressing homelessness is about the supply of housing, and that's what the fund has been doing. This is about making sure that the step before that, that we're not leaving people out in the cold until they can get into the provision of housing. And what those solutions look like, I don't think anyone around this table knows yet, because it is a really complex space. And again, it is about partnership. I think we'd all acknowledge the substantive matter of the submissions that were opposed to this, saying actually this isn't a space that council should be in. Council previously made the decision that we shouldn't be in social housing. The fund hasn't gotten us back into social housing. It's enabled us to support partners to deliver their work to a higher level. And the same is true for this here. This isn't stepping into a space that we shouldn't be in. This is about recognising issues in our community and addressing them where possible. And I don't think that this will materially diminish the wider supply, but actually help support a holistic understanding of what is needed to have every member of our community securely housed, as is a human right.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments? I'll have the, Councillor Skinner.
Chair, thank you. Housing's been one of my biggest drivers for one of the original reasons for standing on council 10 years ago, and it's even more so now, and the difficulty, and it breaks my heart when people were price of renting, the price of mortgage, and people having to balance whether they pay the power bill or put food on their table after they've paid their rent. And I'm not relitigating our sale of the pensioner flats, but just to give a bit of focus on what that housing reserve was about. When we did sell that housing pensioner flats, that $12 million originally was going to be a general fund, not back into a housing reserve. And when I thought hard to keep the pensioner flats, but when that was lost, I fought very hard. It must have been about 3 or 6 years ago. Took another term to ensure that money, that gain, wasn't just flitted or spent elsewhere, but at least be kept with some sort of ability to provide housing, if it's not us, for those in need. If it wasn't for pensioners, those who do a very good job of it. And that was where the fund was very much focused on ensuring that money went to the likes of Habitat for Humanity, Housing Tasman, etc., any of those CHP or CHIP providers. And it took a term for me to get that around. I see here, though the intent may be good, I see it really is watering down what that housing fund initially was for. No, we're not there to provide sort of wraparound service or beyond, but I felt it was very important if we lost those pensioner flats, which served a very good purpose. I felt, and much of the public felt, that this fund would serve an equal purpose, and which I thought it did extremely well. And that's the original intent. And the likes that provided that those organisations that were able to show and prove their ability within Nelson and hit the threshold of being a trust and providing in a sector where other organisations or central government may not be able to do, that made me happy. I see here, I think now we're suddenly diluting it back to a broader, and I think and then it's making it tougher for the same dollar for those groups like Habitat for Humanity, Tasman Housing Trust, or those others that can step up and show that they reach that criteria. We've broadened it beyond organisations that provide that criteria in a proven way. So no, I do not support us broadening it. I support us retaining it as a housing reserve for those who can put a roof over the head for those that qualify. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you through the Mayor. So I am supportive. I did find it very useful listening to oral submissions and some of the written stuff as well about the concern around scope creep and us going into areas we're not qualified. What I see it as a lever that we may or may not use, and we would take into account those concerns. And I do agree it's more about partnerships and supporting those organisations qualify. But like I said, it's just a lever that's nice to have, and I'm not sure how often we would use it.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, thanks to my colleagues for their contributions. It's been really helpful, and I don't think I could say any better than the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor and Councillor Anderson. Thank you very much. But I just wanted to give an example of what the amendments and the resolution and the change to the housing reserve in front of us will enable. So we have staff who work in community partnerships. They are part of our housing task force, and they have expressed the need for us to really understand the issues facing our community. And so we have undertaken a gaps analysis, and there'll be a report on that coming up to council in the next few months. But that work wasn't able to be funded through the housing reserve, even though it is the core focus and business of the housing reserve. And so this change really just enables us to really undertake the work that we need to be doing. I see that it's an enabling change to the housing reserve, that it enables us to broaden our partnership approach and endeavour to work with others to address extreme housing insecurity that some in our community experience. I do acknowledge the concerns raised by submitters, and I want to provide some assurance that the intention of our approach is not to weaken the impact of the housing reserve, but to strengthen it. And to this end, I have also proposed another amendment that will hopefully look to us to consider adding to the housing reserve in future years. So I just encourage our colleagues to support this, because I think it's just a positive impact for addressing housing vulnerability in our community.
So consistent with the way that I introduced that, Councillor Sanson was exercising her right of reply on the amendment. I'm now going to put the amendment. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no.
Aye.
We now come to the substantive motion. If there are no further contributions, that was moved by myself and Councillor Hodgson.
Sorry, I did want to contribute, and I wasn't sure whether to do it just before or now. So
the motion has now been amendment. We are now considering resolution 6 and 7 as amended by Councillor Sanson's amendment.
And debate, not questions now, right?
And we're beyond questions. We're debating the amended motion.
Awesome. Look, it's really just a quick comment. I think firstly, just around intent, I think the housing reserve was set up like 3 or 4 years ago. And I think as times change, I would hope that we would be reconsidering our strategies and approaches to addressing what really is quite acute housing need that's come about within our community. This isn't us going out and trying to do a bunch of things within council itself. It's just looking to support partners who have creative and innovative solutions to address some of that need. And I think if we close the door to those opportunities, I think we do a disservice to the community. So really supportive of this.
Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I fully support what Councillor Hodgson's just said and what earlier speakers have said. The fact remains that housing is really one of the biggest issues facing this council, facing the city and facing the country. If we can do anything which is going to give this council a little bit more flexibility in the way that it approaches these things, then I'm all for supporting it. So this has absolutely got my support. Thank you.
The comments that I would add is relevant in the announcement that's been made by government in the last 24 hours. And it's this. The amount that is spent on housing is truly huge. In this community, it is over $1 billion a year is spent on rents and mortgage payments and housing and the like. And again, I emphasise that we are very small bit players, whether it be in terms of the housing reserve or other initiatives. Now, the significant announcement that affects our approach to the housing reserve is that from the government saying they're going to put a further $150 million into the community housing sector. Now, when we heard submissions on this, one of the nervousness of Habitat for Humanity and the Nelson Tasman Housing Trust was their capacity to grow might be compromised if we use portions of the housing reserve funds for the more vulnerable part of it. My position is that we are a niche player. The main game in addressing housing both in Nelson and New Zealand wide is with the government that has 10 times the resources that we do. And we need to use the housing reserve in quite a targeted, smart way to deal with areas where we need extra. And I am quite satisfied, particularly reinforced by the government's announcement with an extra 150 million to support the community housing sector, that us using a portion of that housing reserve fund to do some smart stuff around the really difficult end of the housing equation is the right thing to do. Thus my support for the resolution. There being no further discussion, Councillor Courtney.
Well, I'll just say something. I'm delighted to support this amendment, or this main motion now that it is, because in my world, housing is a basic human right for the individual, and more particularly for the family. And nothing undermines a person's security and a family's security more than inadequate housing. So if there's anything we can do, and regardless if it's a central government issue or not, it's a human issue, and it is, we're at the coalface, we're at the local government level, and we feel the pain of these people who haven't got a home or having difficulty finding a home. And so it is behoving of us to take on this challenge as well, and not say it's just for central government, because it's not. It's for us as well. We're at the coalface, we understand, and we feel their pain. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you for that impassioned and appropriately so comments from Councillor Courtney. If there are no further comments, my intention is to put the amended resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, say no. That is carried. We come to the next item, which is the all-weather sports field. Was Councillor Skinner prepared to move the staff recommendation? So moved by Councillor Rollo. What I'll do is as per the others, take a mover and seconder on the resolution, the staff rec, then note the mover and seconder on the amendment, allow questions on both at that point. So you're happy to second? So
Mr. Chair, just a procedural note is that we are getting slightly out of order in doing that, and we should be doing questions and then seeking movers and seconders.
I discussed it with council officials prior to the meeting, and they said that it was helpful at the beginning of the process prior to questions. And the reason for it, Councillor, the Deputy Mayor, if I just have a little bit of all formality, is that we've got a staff recommendation. I would prefer to have one lot of questions, including questions that might relate to the amendment, and that's why with staff it was agreed that we'd have the move and seconders prior to questions and then allow questions on both. The difficulty if I don't do that is I've got no authority for the amendment and for questions to be able to ask on it.
I take that. I'm just noting 23.1 of our standing orders, which indicates the opposite.
What I was trying to do, let me just be plain as to what, and I'm very much guided by what councillors would prefer. My intent was to try and enable one lot of questions, because what I didn't want was to start debating the staff recommendation and then having questions running across it. How about we handle it this way, as an indication of those that are prepared to move? Would that satisfy the Deputy Mayor at the beginning?
I just note that the standing orders agrees with you. It just says that all of the questions should be done and then we move into debate. The taking of movers and seconders, I just think on a few of these issues it may come up that there is not, that a potential mover or a seconder has questions that they wish to be answered before they're willing to move or second.
Okay. I think that latter point is likely to be the academic on the amendments that I've had flagged with me. So would I satisfy the Deputy Mayor is I simply take those as indications that Councillor Rollo and Skinner are prepared to move the staff recommendation, and Pete was prepared to move his amendment, and I'm assuming there's someone that's prepared to second the amendment of Councillor Rainey that has been circulated. Quickly. Yes. So what the main thing I'm trying to establish is before we establish questions is in fact there are people that are wanting to move in second, and equally so, to be fair to colleagues, if any other amendments are going to be flagged, my preference is to have them before questions, so that if there are questions so we fully understand what's in those amendments, that we're getting those at that stage of the debate. Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Rohan. You probably saw me pause. You saw me pause in my uncomfortableness in moving this motion, and it's for that very reason. The staff have done some very good work on this. Yes, we should and can move in second, Premier, move in second. The report is received because I think it's a very good report, but we want to have an opportunity to ask and get the staff to sort of ratify or justify or put our minds to ease why it is might have been different to what I was intending to have on there. So you saw the difficulty I had in moving or seconding what was on the table, because I'd like to have had some questions to ask and hear the questions from the others, and that is good. That's good process, and it's good process because it shows I haven't made a mind up before I've had a chance to have a report from the staff. So by means, a received report, so it's a report that you're glad and you accept as well written, but we must have a chance to answer questions. So before you move a motion, you can move to accept the report, because otherwise I've said don't accept the report. We say go away, come back, it's not good enough. But I think it's a very good report. So please, that was why I paused for a long time, knowing exactly what was on the agenda, knowing that when during workshops, I'd signalled this was a direction away from what I had intended, but I also understood why the staff had come to a good compromise, I might say, and I wanted to have a chance to really push that through to see if I still and possibly support that. So
the way I'm going to proceed,
I'd like to see some better process,
sure,
and rather than a predetermined view shown before we even question, before we even debate. Same with amendments. Amendment will come in after usually a chance for people to understand what's on the table. Otherwise, it's really shown that we've come to conclusions of amendments, we've come to decisions before we've even sat at this table to hear each other out.
I've just had a note passed to me that Robin concurs with the process that I've outlined, but I really just want to make progress in a collegial way. It is my intention at the beginning of each item to establish who are likely to be the movers and seconders, and that then enables me to say, well, actually, for the amendment that is proposed is that there are people that are prepared to move it, and to enable then questions to be directed at staff on the amendments about what it means.
All due respect, I think you've got that backward, because you will see once you've got it on the table, people will then go, actually, I'd like to move that or won't move that. And I appreciate you give the opportunity to those who may have had a big part in that, and I think people will respect at the table and enable that. But to try and quickly move in second before we've had and get a signal from who's going to support this before we've heard each other at the table or heard the staff out to identify a report, I think is poor process. Thank you.
If I had staff advising me that my way forward was in some way a breach of the standing orders, I would certainly take that on board. I've had the opposite advice, and I tend to proceed on that way. Where I slightly disagree with you, Councillor Skinner, is it's not like these issues are new. Remember, we have gone out with a proposal. We've received public submissions. The stage we are in the process is what changes are we going to make to the initial position in response to those public submissions, and we're considering the staff report, having them reflected on the staff submissions as a way forward. So let's see if we can make progress. Questions, and I'm happy to take questions both on the staff recommendations and also on the amendment. And the first question is from Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Kia ora, Andrew and Paul. I recall during the submissions that there was a comment, I won't say claim, but a comment that the proposed artificial turf would be made from sugarcane fibres rather than petroleum derivatives and microplastics, and it would be compostable at the end of the life. I spent quite a bit of time, I was excited, and I spent quite a bit of time looking into this, and I couldn't find any examples of this. It seems that all of the ones that are available online, all the different companies, it's just a portion sugarcane, and it's still microplastics and petroleum derivatives and is not compostable. I'm just wondering if you have any further information that would support it being wholly sugarcane and compostable at end of life.
Through the mayor, no, I was able to spend a little bit of time, but not enough really to dig into it. But that would have to be something I would imagine that would be part of that investigation in the next stage.
Thanks.
My question was about the submissions. On this issue, I interpreted the submissions as being slightly in favour of proceeding with the all-weather turf, but it was the most balanced in terms of the 8 specific questions that we put to submitters. My question is, in the submissions that did not support proceeding with an all-weather turf, was it that, and here's my problem, and it's a problem for you in answering the question, I understand as well. Some of them said that they just didn't want the decision confirmed until they had a location confirmed. What would you think, broadly speaking, would be the best description of those that did not wish to proceed with this item? And there were a significant number of submissions on it, Andrew.
Through the mayor, I'll give my view, and Andrew, you might want to add something as well. It's difficult to say. A lot of the submissions are quite brief. From what I gleaned from it, it was a bit of a mix. And I'd note that some of the submissions in opposition were from clubs. It was around the location that not being decided, and that it may not be preferable to them to have one away from where their home ground is. And also, I think there was a feeling that the lighting is a real problem, and you know, it's dark in winter after hours. Some groups feel marginalised because they can't get under a well-lit area, and they were keen to see that progressed. But it was difficult to answer that, definitely. But I'm not sure, you know, if you've got anything to add, Andrew.
Some of those I felt that had submitted against were not opposed in principle, just felt there was more work required, and defining sites and those things was what I felt, and there was a range. Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm just after some clarity. Because last term we had 2 reports. One was a all sports ground audit, and the other one was about the all-weather turf and identified locations. Are those 2 reports now redundant?
Through the mayor, we've actually had 3. The first one we had was a capacity analysis, which showed that we actually have a surplus of game space, but we have a deficit in training space. And then after that, we did a feasibility study, which said, yes, it is feasible that we could have this artificial turf. However, codes would have to fund 100% of the depreciation and some other costs as well. And then following that, we had a business case done, and that was the one that recommended at this time, the recommendation would be to proceed with lighting and not an artificial at that time. And that was in time for the last LTP. And that's why the funding was in the 21 LTP for lighting and not an artificial.
Okay. So then based on the lighting in the LTP previously, so number 8 and number 9, and then changing it to sport grounds improvements in number 10, did we consult on keeping the funding in the long-term plan from previous for lighting and then bring in the extra money for the feasibility around the all-weather turf? Or is that the same money that we're just trying to change to cover both?
Through you, Mayor Nick. So what you consulted on through the long-term plan was to fund the all-weather turf, and partially to offset that, you consulted on reducing the budget that was set aside for lighting and drainage improvements, the majority of which was for lighting. I say reducing because you didn't consult on removing all of it, but you consulted on reducing it by $500,000.
Okay, so then when it says there in number 10, noting the change for the funding allocation from that, so the recommendations that are up there are in line with what we consulted on and still meet the requirements of going forward regardless of whether we do it all-weather turf or not?
That's the key question in respect to that recommendation, which is whereas what was proposed in the long-term plan was 100% for an all-weather turf, to change that recommendation from all-weather turf to sports grounds improvement allows council more flexibility depending on what comes back from that study that is proposed to be done by Sport Tasman there.
Thanks, Mennick. Just wanted to check that with those three previous reports, and particularly with regard to motion 8 before us, just some comment on the fact that those items to consider for Sports Tasman do represent genuine gaps and that haven't been covered by the previous reports, and how we can avoid sort of just delaying the process when in fact we've already looked at it already.
Yeah, I think, and that's the benefit of it coming back to council to approve that, like the terms of reference of that report, I think. And I think it should be done by an independent and not council officers going to a consultant. So I think I think that would be a good approach, what's suggested there.
Just to clarify, if I may, so you're satisfied that there are sufficient gaps in the previous reports that we should undertake this work and we're not just replicating the previous reports?
I'll answer that one. So as Mr. Harrington was saying before, there were 3 reports that were done, and there was a feasibility study done, being one of those 3 reports on an all-weather or artificial turf. And it said that there could be a place for an artificial turf. The subsequent business case said that the best use of resources for the 2021 to 31 LTP was to improve lighting and to a lesser extent drainage, principally I think probably for training improvements. But because the feasibility study said that there was a place for a synthetic turf, it didn't cover all of those questions, like where it should be, the questions probably around the design, around environmental sustainability and that sort of thing. So I think as staff, we would be pretty confident that this wouldn't just be a rehash of existing work. It would actually be quite a significant advance on the work that's been done to date.
Councillor Courtney, then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Through to Officer Paul. Paul, item 8 here, approach Sports Tasman requesting that they undertake an assessment of the case for investing in an all-weather turf. What has our communication been like? What degree of discussion have you had with Sports Tasman at this point on the subject?
Through the Mayor, very brief. I contacted Sport Tasman to just give them a steer on where council is potentially heading and would they be comfortable with that work. And they said, look, they supported this approach. They said they agreed it should be an independent if it's going to be continued, and they were happy to do it if they were considered to be the most appropriate one. But, you know, they were happy to do it, but accepted if it wasn't them.
Councillor Courtney?
A follow-up with that. Have they the capacity to do the work? I mean, will it be costing council more for them to do the work for us?
So there's 20K added there for them to, that would be for that work. And yeah, they had discussed it amongst themselves and felt that they had capacity.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Skinner.
Yes, thank you for your report. As you've seen in the workshops, I've indicated that I felt this was a backward step from what I felt previous councils and public's potential intent. But in the comment about location, etc., and that third business case, because they were pretty robust, detailed, very detailed, and very impressed with the consultants we got, and I like to think they were very independent. To us, they were given a scope and independently, and some of their reports came back differently than I thought they would be, but actually I thought, no, they make a incredibly good point, and they were very robust. In fact, they spoke to just about every club, player and organisation and the community use, not just for a game of football, but the community usage of it. And in that report, they did identify the place for it to be. So, and I'm not saying it wrong, but I've come across that. It came a very specific, obviously this LTP, we were not trying to say where it to go, but to see if the public was still of a very huge desire for it. So that was my question, if you accepted the case that the reports are pretty robust and details showed a location or locations, or actually a location, and they were independent. I always found them and assumed they were very independent of us as a council. That's why we said go out and tell us what we know or don't know.
Well, you are correct. They were fairly robust and they did show a location, but they also recommended not to proceed with an artificial. So that was the business case, which was the last one we've done in 2020.
And the third, sorry, through the chair, and the third one was if we were to proceed because council at the time and publics have felt there was more than just the sporting field advantages, and I think that's why there's been a lot of goodwill, both councils, for some sort of moving forward, is because of the usage. Whether the refugee community that love being able to play with different people, you know, whether it be basketball, tennis, soccer, rugby on there, you don't have to speak the same language to enjoy that, and it really creates some bonds. And I think that was where much of the public gain and the councillor gain was from it. So in that sense, I sort of see the report. That's why I felt the report was very unbiased, and it said, hey, we can do it without. So the question is, are we not just rehashing? My view, as I pointed in the workshop, I felt we're going backwards. So my view is, have we not gained all the information we need from those previous reports? I see an advantage with Sports Tasman, maybe gives them an update what's happened in the last 12 months and the technologies.
Yeah, through the mayor, I think it's a fair move to go out again for some more information. It has been 3 years, and we've been out to the community on a specific question now, and it was fairly balanced, the response. So I think it's a fairly reasonable move.
Thank you. I appreciate your work.
Councillor Hodgson.
Through the mayor, I think Officer White mentioned earlier that to inform the 2021 LCP, the conclusion was that the best use of funds was to invest in existing sports grounds improvements. I guess I just want to know what's changed, or what has anything changed between then and now? And is that in terms of, have we done some of those improvements and the situation might be different? Or is it more that if we have additional funding, then we should be considering artificial turf? Like, yeah, what might have changed?
Through the mayor, I'll openly acknowledge that we haven't done any more work since 2021 on an artificial. And I guess some things came through submissions, for example, what Councillor Sanson raised about this decomposing materials that we really haven't looked into. So that could be potentially something. And I guess communities shift over the years as well. So from our point of view, we really haven't done a lot more work on the business case aspect since that 2021 study.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor?
Just in terms of that 2021 business case, and the improvements it identified, how many have been made in terms of our allocation in the budget, as was in the AMP, separately to what is in front of us today? How many of those can be progressed?
So through the mayor, we're well underway with investigation and progressing that work. No physical work has happened yet. I think the money was staged in a way that it was coming up quite soon. It's not super straightforward. The land in Neil Park, for example, is retired landfill, so there's quite a lot of investigation needed to make sure that that's going to be safe. But yeah, physical work hasn't started, but it is underway, looking at Neil Park and Te Hononui in particular.
And so just in terms of the budgets that we have in front of us, this is suggesting we leave in the funding that was initially earmarked for an all-weather turf, and shifting that to be sports ground improvements. So what is that? Another 1.6 million across 2 years in there. So is that necessary to deliver the previously agreed to improvements, or is that improvements above and beyond what was identified in the business case in 2021?
through you, Mayor Nick, so that is, so if council decided after the work by Sport Tasman that it didn't want to proceed with or with a turf, that funding that is in there would be more than is required for the program of lighting and drainage improvements that was identified during the 21 to 31 long-term plan. And because of that, council, I think, would make a decision at that point in terms of the all-weather turf that it wanted to reduce that funding or reallocate it to something different.
So just to be really clear, in terms of the numbers that were included in the AMP, was that sufficient to implement the recommendations of the business case from 2021?
Yes.
So just to be clear, the draft LTP we went out with provided for 1.35 million, i.e. 50% of an all-weather field spread over 2 years. If we proceed with the officer's recommendation, we get Sports Tasman to do some work on it. They come back and they say that actually we don't think there's a good enough case for the artificial turf. Maybe the sports groups are not going to be able to raise the 1.35 million or other things come to it. At that point, we are not locked in spending the 1.35 million. It comes back to council, its potential saving of which at that point, council has then got the choice as to how much it would reinvest and continue with lights and other things. I understand that correctly?
Yes, you do, Mayor Nick. And I think at that point, we would be recommending that $500,000 that was reduced in this current proposed LTP would be reinstated so that we could continue with that program that was set out in the 21 to 31 LTP.
I've got one other question relating to the recommendations, and that is you're recommending a piece of work being done for $20,000. In the financial year, immediate term, before we've got any other annual planning processes, i.e. 24-25, will there be lights or other improvements that will be able to, within the existing budgets and LTP, progressed in that next year?
I might have to phone a friend for that one. Carl's got more detail on the actual.
Basically, what I want to make sure is that we've got room to be able to continue to make progress on some of those underlying issues.
Sure. So in year one, we're looking at around $33,000, which is to do with the resource consenting that we need to do at Neil Park for the lights. And the bulk of the funding, around $500,000, is in year two to do the actual project of installing lights. And that would be across 2 fields, potentially at Neil Park. And then the next sort of lot of money is in year 5 and then year 8 to do progressive projects at potentially Te Hunanui and another sports field.
So regardless of what decision we make here today on the options before us, we are still progressing with the resource consenting 24-25 and the lights at Neil Park 25-26.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Brand.
Sorry, all these numbers going through my brain now. I just want to clarify. So coming back to Group Manager White, you said we took out 500K to reduce down the burden of rates in the original budget. So if the 1.3 didn't go ahead for the artificial turf, we would replace that 500K back to that budget if the council agreed to continue with the lighting and other improvement on sports grounds. Then that would leave the 800K. If this decision gets made based how it's worded, is in previous budgets, does that money then get reallocated to something of a similar purpose, or does it come back to council to decide, one, that we just won't draw down that debt and therefore the rates would get decreased by 800K, or we would allocate that to something else based on a council decision that didn't necessarily mean sports grounds?
Well, it's a good question. The way I would see this is that we wouldn't see that as some sort of slush fund that could be applied to whatever. We would see that as funding that was no longer required. We're very clear, I think, about what we need for the 21 to 31 program that was identified. We're very clear about that, and we don't need more funds than were originally allocated to do that work. So my view would be, and I think it would be your view too, is that then you have the discretion to decide what happens to that remaining 800,000 if we got to that point in terms of the not proceeding with the all-weather turf.
Okay, what I'm going to do.
More questions.
I'm sorry.
Is
From the
just
DCV.
straight off the back of that answer, then why is the recommendation to change the funding allocation name from all-weather turf to sports ground improvements if the sports ground improvements are budgeted for and this is additional money for an all-weather turf?
Because at this point in your draft 24 to 34 LTP, the budget that is allocated for lighting and drainage improvements has been reduced by $500,000 from what was in your 21 to 31 LTP. It just makes it a little easier for you, I think, to make a decision further down the track that we are still going to apply 500,000 of this, you know, if you don't proceed with the synthetic turf, to that lighting and drainage improvement, rather than come up with a new budget to replace it.
And a quick sup on that. If we didn't make that change of wording and this funding was only allocated for the purposes of artificial turf, the terms of reference for the piece of work being done by Sports Tasman would have to be narrower. What this is, as I'm interpreting you to do, will actually allow them to explore an artificial turf and other options if they work. Have I got that correct?
I think that this investment should be focused on the all-weather turf.
Yep.
I think that's where the key questions are. You know, the key remaining questions are. I think we could actually diffuse the questions with that assessment quite a bit if we were to look more broadly than that.
And just a quick, I'll let Rohan go and then I'll
just
learn a question.
Final question from me, which is if we were to approve this review, the review is to say, go ahead, do the artificial turf. We were to spend that money, noting the $500,000 reduction to other improvements. Would that address the shortfall that was identified in the capacity assessment, or would it leave a gap between the additional capacity provided by the all-weather turf minus the lack of improvements being made to drainage as a result?
Through the mayor, maybe. I think let's see what comes out of it, because, you know, they're not the same thing. They're quite different. I think they have quite different end results that overlap. So you build in a synthetic turf, you're making a decision to invest in a particular location. You invest in improvements across the whole portfolio, you are taking a different approach. But you build a synthetic turf, you're getting much more intensive use in that particular location, and you will be putting lighting with it as well. So I would stick with maybe. I think to go with a synthetic turf, we would have to seriously be looking at how we're making this accessible and affecting a better product across the whole region.
If council proceeds with the recommendations as recommended from staff, what will be the next step for council? Will it have the opportunity to see the terms of reference and membership of the group that would be led by Sports Tasman in doing the next stage of work on the proposal?
Thanks, Mayor Nick. So clause 11, I think, covers that. So we are aware that we need to bring back the draft terms of reference and the scope for the project to council for council to approve before we proceeded with engaging Sport Tasman to do that work.
Councillor Sanson?
Thanks, Mayor, through the chair. I'm just wanting to understand, this would be the fourth study done in regards to artificial turf. So we did one on assessment of the capacity that discovered there was a surplus of game space and we could do with some training. What year would that have been?
I would have to go back and have a look around 2018 probably. I wouldn't say that was specifically about artificial turf though.
Okay, but playing fields. And then we did another one that was a feasibility study that looked at the question of whether it was feasible, but how it would be funded. And there were some question marks around whether sports codes would have the ability to co-fund it. What year would that have been?
I'll have to come back with you with the exact years, but I'm happy
After
to say.
2018, so we could say maybe 2019 to 20. And then we did another one that a business case which came back recommending not to proceed with the sports turf, but to proceed with the improvements. And that was after the 2018-19 one.
That was 2021 because I remember it came in just before the LG.
Okay, 2021. So now we're proposing a fourth study. So it'll be the fourth one in kind of 5 or 6 years. This fourth one's going to be $20,000. I'm assuming each of those previous ones would have been at least $20,000.
I don't recall, but I think the capacity analysis, the first one was more of a desktop thing, so I don't think that was particularly expensive.
Okay. Thanks. Just wanting to understand how much more we might be investing in the possibility.
If that is the end of the questions, I'm going to adjourn for our hourly break to catch up some time. It's my intention when we resume to do an hour and a quarter. That is to flow through from the time of 11:15 all the way through to 12:30 to make some progress. And so that is the conclusion of questions. We'll come back to debate the recommendations from staff and the amendments starting at 11:15. Council adjourned. So that there are no surprises in the approach that goes through the afternoon when we're dealing with a substantive motion and an amendment. The consistent approach that we've agreed we're going to take is after we've had the questions, and the questions period can include questions on any notified amendments. Following the questions, then we will have the mover and seconder, and the mover and the seconder will have the right to speak. After the mover and the seconder, I will invite if there are amendments, and for us then to debate those amendments. So where we're at is that my understanding is that Councillor Rollo is happy to move the staff recommendation, and that is intended to be seconded by Councillor Skinner. The floor is Councillor Rollo to speak to the staff recommendation resolutions. Yes.
Sorry. Just a point of clarification, if I may.
Certainly.
Just so I understand this. I believe that Councillor Rainey's amendment is opposite, quite opposite to the fundamental recommendation that's from staff before us. And that reason, I wonder whether it should be taken first.
No, so I've got this challenge through the day with a number of amendments of those sort. So let me just be clear about how the process I'm proposing is the mover of the recommendations 8 to 11, where there is a supporter for it, will be moved and will be seconded, and they will have the opportunity to speak. After the mover and seconder has spoke, I will invite Councillor Rainey to move the motion. In the event that Councillor Rainey has the support of a colleague to second it, we will then debate the amendment. Every colleague will have the opportunity to be able to address the amendment that's been moved by Councillor Rainey. I will then put the amendment. If the amendment is won, it becomes a substantive motion. If the amendment is lost, we then go back to debate the remaining motion. The reason that process is also necessary is in the event that Councillor Rainey's amendment is unsuccessful, Council still has to deal with what was in the draft LTP around the question, and we fall back to the staff, or It may be in the event that Councillor Rainey's amendment is lost, in which case there may be other amendments. The other thing is I've got a further fallback. Each of these decisions that we are making in principle, as much as possible, I want to get a tidy position on issues as we conclude the process. And so if later there needs to be some, what I call caucusing, to get a sensible position to go into the final LTP, that may be necessary.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Councillor Rainey.
Clarification. You can't propose an amendment or second amendment if you've already spoken to the substantive motion. But I can ask questions on the substantive motion, correct?
The rules, as I've been advised by Robin, is that if you have spoken on the substantive motion,
in debate.
you have in the debate, not in the questions, in the debate, you have foregone your conclusion. So if I give the specific example, Pete, after Councillor Rollo and Skinner have made their contribution, if then you give an impassioned view about those recommendations, I'm advised that I could not accept your amendment. And that is why I think just to have a common sense format is after the mover and seconder, then I should seek the person to move their amendment so that we have an orderly process. As much as possible, I want a process that just works for us all and is quite fair. All right, I'm going to proceed on that basis. The floor is Councillor Rollo's to move resolutions 8, 9, 10 and 11 with respect to the all-weather sports fields.
All right, thanks, Mayor Nick. And look, I support this with probably the most reluctant yes I've ever had in my life. And I'll tell you why that is I think what we proposed in the LTP and where we are now is we're still at square one and we haven't proceeded any further. However, there's a good reason why I support this, and that is because in the last 6 years, sport in this town has changed in a very good way. I would believe in it. I can share this where I play for a football club that have 6 years ago had 2 teams and we now have 7. So if you want to see sport on the rise, there's a key example. Look, I have full confidence in Sport Tasman to undertake this. We are so fortunate in this town that we have a regional sporting trust, and I think for a number of years, councils have probably not used them to the best platform they could, and that's no fault of everyone's. We simply haven't known what regional sporting trusts are for. In the LTP process, we got a clear number of people who were in support of getting this all-weather field. However, I think the question that was asked was very much, do you support it, yes or no? And we didn't really get any more outcomes, and we had a few say yes and a few say no. This approach here that we're taking of going to Sport Tasman can ask a whole lot of questions. We can find out who's actually wanting to front up with the money, which is a huge thing, I think. We have to know that clubs and people are willing to put money in towards it. We're not Christchurch United that have a huge investor who's going to build a whole sporting complex. We need to work out how we can do this as a Nelson model. And I believe as well using Sport Tasman to do this is it's really going to approach people who may not have fronted up in the long-term plan to really find out where they're about. I was privileged enough to be in Wellington last Saturday, only to have my heart broken by watching my dear Wellington Phoenix lose an extra time. But I managed to spend a number of hours watching football that day on an all-weather field. And the thing that was so cool about this was that one game would finish and within 5 minutes the next game was underway and there was no one needing to take stuff off the field. They were going on straight away. And look, I think we are really falling behind. However, I don't think we still have the answers, and this next step will really give those answers on if the community are willing to get behind this and where they're going to find the money. So I'm happy and I'm glad that the staff have come up with this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner, do you wish to exercise your right to speak at this time?
Yeah, speak on this one to go beforehand. Okay, thank you. Yep, no, pretty similar and well put, Councillor Riley. Actually, Councillor Riley always, was it 60,000 people at the Phoenix, he got his 2 seconds of fame on the news. I don't know how they found him. He got on there. So well done.
Don't share it too far.
So, yes, I was very appreciative of the response back from the public. And in fact, 85% of the public, if you combine those two, option 1, option 2 votes, 85% of the public said, yes, please keep improving our sporting facilities, our football sports fields. 48% said, yes, go ahead, please, with an artificial all-weather turf. And that would have suited me well in the sense that my strong view is to continue the great work and support the public we've actually been crying out for many years. But it was also interesting to see nearly 40% said, hey, we don't want to compromise going with sports with turf and lose out possibly on continuing to improve the lighting and quality of our fields. So I think public have felt like shivers, we can't have it both, we can go one or the other. So it was very clear to me, 85% are basically saying, please either continue improving our sports fields, or the other 48% saying, please do an all-weather turf. Sports, like all sports, have changed a lot. The expectations, there's more women playing, more kids playing, and the expectations of having a muddy field and grubby changing rooms has long gone. And to keep young people and all sorts of people involved in sport, and especially getting women involved as well, you want to make sure you have very good facilities. And that I commend our staff. We're continually improving on that, and both from the last long-term plan and this long-term plan recommendations, we're very much stepping in that right direction. I also commend that the likes of Sports Tasman, I think that's a very good call for them to look further into it. And as I appreciate the support originally when we were putting this out to the LTP, and last term when it just missed out, was that a lot of that reasoning for it and the drive for me for it was not just for higher grade football. I think my footballing days have long gone, but it meant inclusivity, and it meant whether you kick a ball or not, it got people down there. We've got a turf where everybody can play basketball. You open to the public, whether it be or with a turf, you can play netball, basketball, a bit like they got the very small one. I don't know if you've seen it, the NMIT, and at Hampden Street School. It doesn't suit a full game, but it's a great place. People just head down there and they use it and abuse it, and it's well utilised. And those invested in that are grinning on their faces that it's getting young people and old people out there. So I do support what we've got here on the table in regards to the, I won't call it compromise, but I think a real good end result, that we go to the Sports Tasman and say, hey, what do you think? How can we make this as good as possible to include all communities and those people that may benefit greatly from it? And it would also, I think, help tighten up how it would be funded. I absolutely am very confidently that based on previous terms, recommendations, that the sporting and football community and rugby community were very much behind and able to provide that huge bit of the funding, 50%. But I think this will help reassure a timeline to follow, because I think it could be a bit pressured if we sort of say, hey, this is a turf coming next year or a year after, before we got all those fundings aligned and prepared. So I support what we've got in there. Please ask people to do that, because I think this is whatever they decide, whether it's continue improving our sports fields to greater capacity or include an all-weather turf, I think it'd be great for our community. It'll get those events here that bring economic gain. It'll get all sorts of young kids and people who like to just run around and meet new friends. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. My understanding is that Councillor Rainey wishes to move his amendment.
That's correct, Mayor Nick.
Could I see whether there is a seconder for Councillor Rainey's amendment? Councillor Hodgson, the floor is yours, Pete.
Now, I just would like to get some clarification from staff, some advice from staff, or potentially our wording guru who's sitting on the top table there, whether this amendment as it stands represents a direct negative to the substantive. I'm not so sure that it does.
The advice I received this morning in checking that is that I would not have accepted it if that were the case. My understanding is that officials were satisfied that it was not a direct negative. And one of the reasons it's not a direct negative is the words after and. That is saying this is an alternative direction. It's not just saying don't do that, it's saying do this. So I'm happy to accept the amendment, Pete, as is.
Okay, thank you. Well then, I'll speak to it now, if I can. I think it was really great that we got so much of a response through our submission process, both written and oral submissions. And I was really struck by those in the sporting community who don't support the notion of a all-weather turf. I was really struck by that. And I think that even after an assessment by Sports Tasman, if one was to take place, I fear that we will still come back to the same underlying issues regarding the provision of all-weather turf. And that is, if we proceed, it will reduce the figure that we agreed on in the asset management plan round last year for other sports grounds other than the all-weather turf. That's been made quite clear to us this morning. I think that it favours a smaller group over and above the wider users of our sports grounds. That's inevitable. Not every code and every sports person is going to be able to use potentially an all-weather turf. Setting aside the fact that there may be potential green solutions, and we don't know that, the fact remains that an all-weather turf has a low lifespan and an expensive renewal schedule, so to speak, for which the ongoing cost recovery potentially could be met by users, but that's not guaranteed. If the users can't keep up with that, I know where that cost will come back to. The fact that it's not supported by significant sporting groups who favour continued better turf development and lighting resonates with me. Location would be an issue that may be impossible to resolve satisfactorily for all codes, and ongoing cost issues may, as I said, be insurmountable for codes as well. So I think a study is something that could happen, but the reality is we come back to the same group of facts that at this stage don't support us going ahead with it or with the turf. I would urge councillors to deal with this today. We have the option of dealing with it right now. Get it sorted. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rainey. Did the seconder wish to exercise his right now?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Yeah, this is my first LTP, and I think one of the things I've been conflicted on in my head is that there's a few proposals that have come through where we've done reports or feasibility studies or strategic assessments, and I feel far more compelled to support them because we've communicated to the community, we've already spent the money, we've done some of that work. And then at the same time, we're at this point where we're looking at going out and doing a report, and I'm going, well, it's good to have more information, so let's do some more reports. But I guess the challenge for me is we can't do reports on and studies on everything, and we can't say yes to everything. And so that's the slight area of conflict that I'm finding myself in. I think what helps me support this amendment is the staff's confidence in our previous approach. I think there's also a bit of uncertainty in the community. It doesn't seem like there's been a strong, cohesive drive towards seeking this outcome for an artificial turf. And I'd like to see that take place a bit more in the community first. I don't think this amendment is pro-sport or anti-sport. I think that we can all agree that sport is fundamental to well-being. And there's lots of LTP support for lots of different types of sport. And I think long may that continue. I also think there actually is a need here. There's just so many competing priorities, and there are times where we have to say no. And I think this just isn't top of the list. And so for me, this is a time where we just have to say, for now, it's a no.
My contribution would be, I think no is the wrong approach, which is substantially what Councillor Rainey's amendment proposes. And I do so for 5 reasons. The first is, I love the fact and are hugely proud when I see those census data of Nelson being the most active region in New Zealand, of more of us being involved in sport and recreation, and I think it is at the core of what we are as Nelsonians. When I travel around the country to various centres similar to our size, I think our facilities in this particular area are deficient. And I look at just the hundreds of sports teams of all ages participating on those that have all-weather turfs in similar sized cities around New Zealand, and I think this is a gap in our sporting infrastructure. The second point for me is, yes, we went out to submissions and we had 423 people say, yes, they support it. Yes, there were 330 that had different views, albeit among the 330, quite a few of them were saying needs more work, needs more debate, maybe we need to, and more thought given to it. I think actually to proceed with the motion from Councillor Rainey is to override those strong 423 submissions of people that supported it. But when it really comes to the crunch as to whether something is going to support, it's easy to fill out a form and say, I support it. The hard part is to raise the money. And this project is not going to proceed unless sports clubs can contribute $1.35 million. And in my view, that is a very strong check to ensure that it will only proceed in the event that it has broad support. There was a very telling moment for me in the public submissions we received that. And that was from Nelson FC and from the Nelson Rugby Club. And man, I have a sense of Nelson pride that this city was the birthplace of New Zealand rugby. And the performance of our Mako and both our women and men's rugby in the city. And I look at those old rugby club facilities that we currently have on Trafalgar Park, and they are tired and outdated. Equally, when I hop across the road and visit Nelson FC, again, I just see hundreds and hundreds of kids of all nationalities, actually most from lower socioeconomic areas, participating in growing football and doing great stuff. And when I heard that submission from both FC Nelson and Nelson Rugby, I heard the gem of an exciting development and idea for the future of the city and around those sports in the central city. And I did see all the time as a parent the number of games that are continuously cancelled as a consequence of our fields being muddy. So I'm in the space that says I do not want to close the door on a all-weather turf. My view is there is more work to do. My view is that our staff recommendation for getting Sports Tasman to pull those groups together to crystallise what is the right way forward. I, for instance, could be persuaded that it be at Saxton Field, subject to a contribution from Tasman Council. The thing can only proceed if there is a very strong contribution from sport. If we proceed with Councillor Rainey's amendment, we are effectively saying absolutely no progress to this issue of the next 3 years. And my view is we should leave it on the table, throw the challenge back to the sports clubs through Sports Tasman to be able to better coordinate their efforts and put a more persuasive case to this council on the specifics that we could go. If we proceed and take these items out of the long-term plan, we close the door, and I think that would be a mistake. Councillor Pakipaki.
Tēnā koutou. So I think it's been echoed quite clearly that really we're going down the same path of this death pile of reports. The council does this quite a lot. I think my first point I just want to make is that an all-weather turf is not the keystone to participation. It just simply isn't. To suggest that it is and participation is reliant on us providing this asset is just wrong. The other thing I'd like to also put an opposing view is that rugby was tagged onto this agenda about, Nelson being the first game of rugby. At no stage in this conversation has rugby been mentioned that this facility would be providing anything for it. And as my understanding, it was more towards soccer. So we need to really look at our priorities and what we're wanting to do with this initiative. And my objectives come from a place of that it really doesn't reach enough of the community. That's a fact. It doesn't solve the all-weather problem. We already have that as a consideration, and our team has already been working on the improvements to our fields, especially in terms of drainage. And we have so many better things really that we can focus on with our existing assets. And in this time where we're really under pressure, we're being squeezed in every other part of this LTP. And this really is an austerity project that we don't need. We've got a Christmas tree here. I think I used the analogy that really this is like the star on the top, but we don't have any other decorations and everything else is all dilapidated. And we're just looking at this amazing piece of what could be really neat for the community, but I don't think we're really in a position to be even talking about that at this stage. So I really support this motion that Councillor Rainey has put forward, and I think that if we proceed with even with the report, we're really sending the community the wrong message. And just simply adding to the death pile of reports that we have before us. So kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora, Councillor Pakipaki. Other contributors, Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. So I'm speaking in support of the amendment, and I thought that Councillor Hodgson's comment about the amendment not being pro-sport or anti-sport or was a really important one. This is not about being anti-sport at all. I've been on council now for 5 years and we've had 3 reports already, considering a 4th one. It feels like deja vu. The last LTP process, we decided on the recommendation of a really professional and robust business case not to proceed, but to invest in maintenance. I acknowledge the support for this in the community, but I also acknowledge the concerns raised. And I think for me, this comes down to an equity issue, that we have got existing sports grounds across the region that are valued by a large number of users that desperately need maintenance. We are the most active, in the region and the country, which is fantastic. And I don't think that supporting this amendment takes away from that. I actually think that reinstating the maintenance budget will benefit all sporting users. I think the finances are a factor. Co-funding from us, or I guess co-funding from the supportive clubs of about 1.35 million. There's ongoing maintenance. There's the funding of depreciation, and then there's replacement in 8 to 10 years. These are not insignificant costs. New Zealand is the birthplace of rugby, but I note that some rugby clubs were not supportive of this initiative. And I think that finally supporting this amendment does not constrain sporting activity. In fact, it expands it through prioritising maintenance at sporting fields across the region. So
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. I'm going to have the Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, look, I think the key thing where we have issues like this is actually figuring out first where we agree. And what is clear here is the problem. We've spent a lot of money and done a lot of reports to really clearly tell us what the problem is, which is not an undersupply of sports grounds, it's an undersupply of usable hours, particularly in winter, particularly for training. We know the issue. What do we do then? We go, what are the options to address it? And so we did that. We did a feasibility study. It was noted that that feasibility study didn't consider other options, but it did say artificial turf is feasible. I could have told you that, but we then go forwards and we go into a business case. At the same time, we did a secondary review from the earlier 2017 review of sports field capacity. Those two, the most recent independent expert advice that we have, both said an artificial turf won't solve your problem and shouldn't be the priority. So if we can agree on the problem, and the advice we have is that this won't actually address the solution, why would this be the first cab off the rank? And why would we delay the clearly recommended other options that would better address the problem? Because I do think that there's wide agreement that the issue is there and that we want to address it. And I don't think that that means ruling out an artificial turf into the future. It's just saying that actually of the shortfall of about 88 hours per week that we have directly in Nelson City, somewhat offset by availability in Richmond, but recognising the accessibility challenges there. When you take all of that into account, is a single artificial turf in a single location going to fully address the problem? And all of the advice says, no, it isn't. At its highest use case, it provides 55 hours of use, and that is being used at unconventional times as well, that sports clubs currently don't use the existing facilities. So if we take the most radical interpretation, we go, we're building this, we're going to get every single second of use out of it we can, we're still going to have a problem that needs to be addressed. If we implement the AMP that we signed off in 2021, the recommendation was that we'd address the problem in full. To me, if we're going to make a trade-off, we should choose the option that's going to fully address the problem. Now, that's not to say that growth isn't going to continue to occur and that demand will reach a point where an artificial turf is a key piece of investment that we want to make. And when that happens, I will be probably not around this table, but if I am, I will be saying, make that investment and make it now. But what's in front of us is a trade-off between fully addressing the problem and not. I think the option that says to our sports clubs, we want you to thrive and survive, and we want our young people, our old people, our lovely middle-aged people to be getting out and being active, we should be choosing the option that's going to fully address the problem, as we've paid tens of thousands of dollars to get the expert advice to tell us what that option is. So I don't think that this is a yes sports, no sports. I just fundamentally reject that assertion because the resolution in front of us better addresses the problem as per the evidence that has previously been presented to this council. If we are to get fresh evidence that suggests something else, well, then we should be doing another sports field capacity review, not selecting the option that we think will address it. And I do want to acknowledge why I think this has come up is that actually identifying an artificial turf has been part of the problem identification of saying we need this. And when you dig into that, which is our job as elected members, is to go, why? The why is the lack of usable hours. We need to be the ones because we have the time and resources to interrogate the options in front of us and evaluate them, is to say, yes, we agree, there is a problem, but we have a solution that will work. And if it doesn't, we can come back and we can provide more capacity and we can provide an artificial turf. But there's been no evidence so far to suggest that that is the option that's actually going to address the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So I kind of had enough information a long time ago to say no to turf, but I was happy at going out to consultation. So just quickly, a lot of my stakeholders, I was quite surprised, are in favour of this. Migrant community and yes, a lot of people I didn't think would be keen on it. So just in fairness to, it did go out to LTP. I was supportive of that to hear what the community said, and I do feel that staff have come up with a compromise that I'm willing to take. I'd imagine it's going to land somewhere different, but I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Any other contributions on the amendment? Pete, your right of reply. Councillor Rann. I'll now put... Oh, yes, certainly. Councillor Courtney.
We've got to remind ourselves, we must remind ourselves that these are difficult times. We're not in a cocoon here. The reality of life is that it's very difficult outside for people, outside of this chamber, and we've got to keep telling ourselves of that fact. It's hard. And I've learned all through life, it's hard to say no. And it seems the final. But then an alternative to that is every day is a new day. We don't know what might happen tomorrow, but as we sit today, I think we need to say no. And it is difficult because, as other speakers have said so eloquently, You know, no one wants to turn this down. We all want this artificial turf. We certainly do. And all the arguments I've heard, I agree with. But this is not the time. This is not the project. And I don't think it'll be received well in the community if we move forward on this at this time. It'll have its time at some stage in the future. But I won't be supporting it now because we've got a cost of living crisis, and these are very difficult times for a huge number of people in this community. So I can't, with a clear conscience, support this particular thrust that we're going in, but I support the amendment.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the amendment.
Can we do a division?
Happy to do a division. I'll ask the Chief Executive to carry out a division on the amendment that's been moved by Councillor Rainey and seconded by Councillor Hodgson.
Division on the amendment. Councillor Anderson.
No.
Councillor Benge, I understand you're not online. Are you online, Councillor Benge? Apology. Councillor Brand.
No.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Hodgson.
Aye.
Councillor Paki. Aye. Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Rollo.
No.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Skinner.
No.
Councillor Stallard.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor.
Aye.
Now Nick.
No.
7 to 5.
I declare the amendment carried by 7 votes to 5. As a consequence, I think it subsudes. Sorry? It becomes a substantive motion, and so now I need to put the substantive, now amended motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
No.
We now move to the next item on the agenda, which is in respect of the Surf Life facility. Could we have the appropriate staff for any questions there might be on this facility? Welcome. Any questions on the staff report and recommendations with respect to the Surf Life facility at Taranui Beach? Councillor Stallard, just as a note, I have had circulated to me this morning a letter in respect of the government announcement at the beginning of the week. That announcement was where the government announced $54 million of funding nationwide, and the letter clarifies what the purpose of that is for, and it's for the purposes of councillor simple information and should be in your inbox. Question from Councillor Stallard for staff.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. The question is, the funding to upgrade the changing rooms, which is part of the motion, was that in the previous long-term plan? And if so, for what year?
So no, that wasn't currently, wasn't previous in the long-term plan. That's money that was added at the same time as the money was added for the sports, for the surf lifesaving facility. There is funding, I guess you could say, in the long-term plan for improvements and upgrades. So this would add to existing budgets to mean that we could do a more meaningful upgrade of that space.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow that up, if I may, so could you just briefly give us a bit more information about those upgrades, like what the total cost might be and to what degree the motion before us will contribute to that and when it might occur?
So no sort of detailed scoping work or investigation has been done into an upgrade. The intention would be to try and increase the facilities that we have. So that's the green kind of block that's there, main sort of changing room block. So this money would be targeted at, trying to increase the facilities we have there as far as volume, not just the kind of improvements to the existing facilities.
Okay, and sorry if I just one more. So what amount are we voting on for the upgrade of the changing rooms?
So I believe there's $50,000 been added in here, but that, as I'm sort of just trying to allude to, that yeah, that's not necessarily the total budget for the improvements to that building. There are other existing budgets we could add to that.
Thank you. And do you know the amount of the existing budgets?
Not off the top of my head, no, I'd have to delve in and have a look.
Councillor Brand?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Sorry, just on that 50,000 that's been added to this budget for the upgrades, would that then be added to other budgets if this was not to go ahead as the overall recommendation for the changing rooms?
So I believe there's one sort of resolution here. So yeah, if this is not approved, then yeah, that money wouldn't be added to the existing budgets.
Okay, and right, so then you just make do with what you have. So on this, when it says that we would construct a new facility, who would own that facility?
So we're currently continuing work that was sort of approved through the previous annual plan where we had some money for feasibility. So as part of that work, we are having discussions around the ownership of that building and the sort of structure in the future and who would use it, but that work hasn't been completed and there's no kind of definitive answer at this current point around who would own the building.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you heard the submissions. So the submission from the Life Surfing Club came across that they would be the sole occupier and then rent out to others to use that space if needed. And then we had a presentation from another club that suggested that they could be in that facility joint with the Lifesavers. So just based on your answer, that work hasn't actually been confirmed or identified about who the primary user was, who would own the building, who would be responsible for the ongoing upkeep and consents, maintenance, depreciation, and who has overall accountability of that facility. Is that what you just said?
There's quite a lot wrapped up in that question. For me, the ownership hasn't been resolved. The key or primary user of that facility is intended to be the Surf Lifesaving Club. There is, in the kind of current concepts that we're looking at, a meeting space, I guess you could call it, that could be used by the community, but we are not aiming to have a hub type space in this area. We are not looking to include other users as sort of primary tenants or anything like that. This is primarily looked at as Surf Lifesaving Club that will be able to be used by community as any other community facility is, and it can be rented out to them or sort of.
So based on that, the expectation of this facility being available for other community use, would that include an alcohol licence permitted in the building if it was used by other clubs?
We're not looking to have any licensing for that building.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pakipaki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to have a bit of clarification because we're going to go quite far down the road with our questioning, and I clearly brought it up in our workshop last week, and that was a separation of the two items that we're discussing at the moment. One of them is the Nelson Surf Lifesaving Club, and the other is the upgrade to the changing facilities. These two have been grafted together as if they are the same thing, and when we're discussing and when we're going to be voting on it, where one can't go without the other, and that was a real, and obviously a significant flaw in the consultative document where we had asked the single question, well, do you support both? Where there was never an option for people to say what line of the fence they actually stood on, so they couldn't express it. Why haven't we, I was under the understanding last week that we were going to be able to separate those when we had this discussion. I do recall asking quite specifically about that in our workshop.
The items were consulted as one. If a member would be welcome to move an amendment along those lines. The only thing I feel is when we're in the public debating stage, Councillor Pakipaki, that you're perfectly entitled at the time of the discussion and the debate on it to say, well, I support this part, but not this part. Now, if it would be material, and that I thought that there was,
Mr. Chair, that only gives us the option of if you support one, we're approving both of them. And the question will be asked, do you support the Turnanui Beach Reserve? Yes, I do, but I don't support the Nelson Light, or whichever one I want to stand clearly on.
look, I want to be as helpful as possible.
How do we get through that?
I could ask the
Prior to us
officers.
having lots of discussion and debate about.
I'm happy to see whether officers could split the resolutions maybe into a 12A and a 12B. And then to put the 12A and 12, I wouldn't like to change the numbers because it's going to make things confusing for the rest of the day relative to our paper list. But why don't we have a 12A and a 12B? If you could word it so that there is one resolution with respect to the $50,000 for the upgrade of the changing facilities at Turnanui Beach Reserve, and the other. Ideally, I would have liked to have received an amendment in advance, but look, I'm pretty.
Well, sorry, Mr. Chair, but I thought that when we had our discussions last week at that workshop, that I did actually make it very clear that I thought that the two of them should be separated. So
I can't.
Apologies if I needed to actually send an email.
I can't recall, and I'm not going to dispute that. But let's just see if we can find a practical solution while we continue questions. Any other questions? Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, and Andrew, Cal, thank you. I probably should have asked this question when I was questioning during the week, but one of the things that was raised during the submissions was that the surf club aren't currently recognised in the Te Hunanui Reserve Management Plan 2004. I'm aware that in the next few months we're going out to consult potentially on a new RMP. Is there going to have to be some interim process that's consulted on with the community if a surf club is to go ahead, noting that it's not currently recognised in the reserve?
I'd have to double check on the reserve management plan. I don't know if it specifically states it, but we have to, part of our sort of investigation work at the moment is looking at what we can and can't do. We did talk at our previous task force meeting around heights and designations and all sorts of things. So that's kind of part of the investigations we're currently doing. I don't think we've had a definitive answer about whether it is or isn't allowed under the RMP and then sort of through the NRMP.
So it's 2004 RMP. It provides for a surf lifesaving club.
Councillor Pakipaki.
I think Councillor Rainey just beat me to the gun.
Pete.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about the recommendation on the issue of alcohol and this facility. And I don't want to harp on about this, but we're vague on it. And I know this is in principle, and you've already stated you don't envisage there being licenses attached to this. I'm talking about 12, not 12A. Hang on. Yeah, just the Surf Lifesaving Club. But I am aware that surf lifesaving clubs around New Zealand, and there are plenty of them, many of them end up being function centres, many of them have bars, many of them have cafes and bars that are open to the public. Now, I have no idea what we're going to end up with here. I have no idea. What I would like to know is, and I guess it might be a reserve management plan question, are we in a position to particularly exclude alcohol from this development? Full stop, end of story. Is that something that is a possibility? I don't want to be a wowser about it. It's just, there are plenty of opportunities to go and have a drink around Te Hunanui. I don't think we need to be introducing one to our beach.
Look, I believe there's ways we could do that. We could have a resolution passed that says that there's no alcohol licensing in the future potentially for that building. And just recognising that we are, as Campbell or Councillor Rollo has alluded to, we are going out for consultation very soon for the, well, hopefully, depending on the outcome of a future meeting, for consultation around Te Huna. We're not predicting what that outcome will be, but parts of that we're expecting to have a push potentially for a sports hub or for improved facilities on the turf as well. And I think those same conversations are going to come up.
So, subsequent question, do you think we're in a position of having to put in place, if we need to test this particular point, Do we need to test it right here, right now, today, or is that something that can come up subsequently in the planning process if this proceeds? Which, can I just say, I really support the notion of a surf lifesaving club on Taunui Beach. I think it's fantastic.
Through you, Mayor Nick, I think Mr. Nolden's sort of covered the two ways we think it could be dealt with. One is a transactional way, which may be the right way. Treat this as a transaction. The other way is a more strategic discussion with the community about what is the right way to go in terms of alcohol at Tahuna Beach Reserve. So I guess I would probably lean more to a strategic discussion with the community about it, but I think you probably could deal with it as a transaction on this particular facility as well. But I think a more strategic discussion would be better.
So quick supplementary, Andrew, at the time down the track, you'll either be entering into agreement for the lease of land that's owned by the Nelson City Council as in the beach, or entering into a lease for the building. The council would be free at that point to put whatever conditions it would wish as the owner, quite regardless of the regulatory regime that existed.
That's right, Mayor Nick. So we do have standard approaches to property leases, whether they're building leases or land leases or ground leases. If council's decision was that it wanted this to be a dry facility, then that would be something that we could put into that lease as one of our requirements as the owner of the land, I would think.
Any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Pakipaki.
Yeah, kia ora, get a haeres I te tūru. So I've got three really quick questions. The membership of the Surf Life Saving Club, do you know what were their numbers? Can you refresh my memory?
I probably have in a report, but I haven't got it at my fingertips.
Just trying to recall, I can't remember if it was the same one I'm thinking of, but as I recall, it was quite low in terms of their actual club membership.
Yes, low is a slightly subjective term, but I think part of the desire for having an improved facility is that they have excess demand and not the capacity to take on some of the potential club members.
Okay, so we've got a surf lifesaving club at a beach that doesn't require surf lifesaving. I know there's lots of activities that they do around that as well. In terms of their use throughout the year, what's the discussions been around that? You know, what are they projecting during, let's just say we've got 3 months of cracker weather and maybe a month or so on either side. What happens for the rest of the year?
So I guess I'm being slightly presumption in answering for the club. I can confirm they have 124 members. 60% of members are from Nelson, 36 from the Greater Tasman area. If it helps, 58 female, and no, that's all good. Like I said, they have a desire to grow. At the moment, I think they are only providing sort of surf life-saving presence on the beach on a Sunday, so they are looking to increase that, but I don't have figures in front of me about what.
I think I was just asking, you know, what sort of during conversations, what have they expressed saying that they intend their activities to look like this?
Yeah,
across the calendar year.
So they've given a whole lot of information to the consultants that are working on this with us, and that's not just around the surf life-saving function, that's around beach education for children, that's around supporting events that happen in the water, so it could be fireworks, could be...
I understand, so that's not real. So I'm talking about the fluctuation of those participations, because I can imagine that's, I mean, when I was younger, we used to do that during summer, never really happened during winter. So what I'm looking at, I'm trying to gauge the depth of use of a facility, you know, that may be very, very focused on one part of the year.
Yeah, so we have started looking at that, and there will be some of that in the report. But the second phase of that, we'll look into more of that. I know that evenings, for instance, similar to evening sport, on our sports grounds that we've just been talking about, there is a high usage sort of in those evenings for meetings, education, club events, things like that. And I'm assuming that'll be at a similar sort of time that there's demand from other sports clubs to use that place. So we are looking at that kind of data to understand how other clubs and how other community groups can use that facility.
Yeah, more so what the club has indicated directly to you through conversations, not making any assumptions.
Yeah.
So, and the third question is when this was thrown at us at the very beginning, I mean, it was under the guise of a community sports hub. It's very clear now that there was a direction to push it towards a surf life-saving club. the containers were part of that argument. That they wanted to try and get the containers out of that area. My understanding is there's quite a few containers down there that has a lot of gear from the Marist Club as well. Is this Surf Lifesaving actually going to solve that problem of containers down at Tahunanui Park?
So this is the first step in a longer process of improving facilities at Tahunanui. So this will address the issues that Surf Lifesaving have around storage, and we'll look at reducing the containers where they have things stored in it. So I think they've got a 20-foot, part of a 40-foot, and they also use part of a Nelmat yard down by the tennis clubs. The sort of next steps, which will be consulted on through the Tahunanui RMP potentially, is where we're going to look at addressing the rest of the containers, sports changing rooms for referees, for women, for junior clubs that aren't currently well provided for. That may be a sports hub that has changing rooms, storage facilities, community spaces, all those kinds of things. It may be a number of smaller facilities.
So I guess the quick sup on that, and this actually relates to participation and use in that, because the same argument can be applied to Marist. And so this frames it as that, you know, they're only there during winter with their rugby season. I'm just looking at shared use of when like the containers, if that's resolved into a facility, whether or not that if we still haven't got anything there for Marist, they will be able to use the, you know, that capacity will be extended to them during the winter months when the Surf Saving Club isn't quite as active. Has that discussion taken place, or is that it's not a question for you guys.
Specifically, that conversation, but I guess the storage thing isn't solved, that they store their stuff there in summer and take it away for winter. It's there all year round, and the event sort of support and the responsiveness. So remember, Surf Lifesaving isn't just saving people in the surf. They take IRBs and they save people who have been caught in a drift in their kayak or a fishing
I will say
boat.
that, sorry, but just on that point, there was part of our brief when we first started talking about this was around safety. So that was a Surf Life-Saving Club. May do lots of other activities, that's cool, but not the, yeah.
Okay, I've got questions from Councillor Brand and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just sort of tailoring on to Councillor Pakipaki's question about the membership, because in the presentation and the submission, they put across that by having a fixed clubhouse on the beach would increase their membership numbers, and they projected how much that would increase by. Have we actually provided, because I didn't see it in their submission and they didn't answer the question, has there been documented proof or evidence through other life-saving clubs throughout New Zealand that have got a permanent building that their membership has grown or remained robust or expanded greater than what it has with one that doesn't have a permanent building?
That's a great question. I don't have those sort of numbers at my fingertips, but it's certainly something we could look into. The group that is, so Veros, who's doing the sort of continued feasibility work with us, works really closely with a number of surf clubs, and they have a range of data sort of from all those surf clubs, and it's something that we could dig into and have a look at, but yeah, not something I have today.
And on the numbers of membership, because also in the submission was that the younger people join and they have this program where their adults join too, so it created the increased number of the younger people and that compared to the adult numbers. Does the, and I didn't see it in their submission and they didn't quite answer the question, is would those numbers have a trend of dropping off as the children get older and decide not to continue as in the life-saving area but go into other sports or groups and things like that? As I noticed that there is a trend in the Auckland Lifesaving and also in the Wellington and in the Christchurch that they do have a trend of drop off in numbers, but this club was projecting an increase in numbers, and I was just sort of wondering if you have the data on that sort of information as well.
Yeah, thanks. The bit of data I do have in front of me is that over half of their membership is under the age of 14. So I guess you can read into that as you will, but certainly their intentions are to grow that club, to maintain those numbers, to grow them through, and to be able to develop those or deliver those programs that are available around education and around those sort of next levels around surf lifesaving and education. So I think there's definitely aspirations in that space. And like I say, we can get back to you with the data on other clubs and how a fixed facility has helped them with that sort of retention.
Thanks. The Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Anderson. I am getting a little worried about time frame. We've got 51 issues to get through. I don't mind questions. They really should be about trying to elucidate information to help you make a decision on the submissions that we've had in response to the long-term plan. The Deputy Mayor.
The resolutions agreed when allocating $100,000 during the annual plan specifically highlighted evaluation of land search and rescues potential to fit into this. Where has that conversation got to? I note that the business case does identify that as one of the opportunities of the recommended approach, but that isn't in the LTP consultation document. And so from a staffing perspective, where has that gotten to?
So there's a couple of parts to that. So what we're trying to create here is a facility on the beach, and we've been really clear that we only want a facility on the beach that has to be on the beach. So we're trying to be really clear that anything that doesn't need to be beach related is elsewhere. The work that we've done at the moment doesn't identify the beach as the ideal location for sort of wider search and rescue. They could be in a range of other locations. What we are trying to provide for is that there is enough space in that meeting room area and meeting rooms that there is the ability to be joined up for education and training and whatever kind of meetings they have, but we're not anticipating storage of equipment, which would significantly increase the sort of footprint of that building, or a sort of permanent home for search and rescue.
Is any work progressing separately from this around their need similarly to Surf Life Saving for a new venue?
Not from us currently as part of this piece of work, no.
Councillor Anderson, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks through the chair. Are we allowed to, are we able to reference the letter that was recently distributed?
Yeah, I tabled that this morning because it provided information in respect of where the other half of the funding might come. And the announcement that was made last week was just circulated through. The government announced $42 million in the budget, and the letter that's been distributed indicates that a portion of that might be able to be met in that one of the criteria is maintaining and the upgrading of Surf Life Club buildings around New Zealand.
Yeah, that's it.
Pete.
Just a quick point that I want to make. The potential for this building to be an iconic building on one of the greatest beaches in the country is really high. I think it's absolutely essential that Nelson City Council retains the ability to direct the design, actually direct the design. The reason I'm saying that is a similar thing happened with the cricket facility at Saxton. I'd love you guys to see the original design that cricket came up with for that building and what we ended up with. It's vastly, vastly different. So that's
Can I just check in response?
Can we insist on
council staff distributed to all councillors the report that was presented to the task force, including the concept design for the facility at Tūnanui?
My understanding is that to get to the task force meeting, it has to be loaded to the LG Hub, which has been done. So councillors have access to all the information that's been presented to the task force.
Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. How far down the road are we, or staff or the club, with where the facility might be constructed, and will it be visible from the beach?
So there's a range of options, yes, that have been considered. There's a preferred option, which is around about where their containers are currently in the dunes, or sort of just on the edge of the dunes. That's the current preferred location, and we are sort of progressing with an initial geotechnical assessment of that site, just to understand what the ground's like and what that means for foundations and sort of the building as a whole.
And just the last part.
Yes.
Is the intention that will be visible from the beach when people are on the beach, look back and see a building in the dunes?
So yes, if you have the time to have a look at there's a concept plan at the end of the last report we have for the task force, and there are some images there of what the building could potentially look like and what the view would be from the beach. And it's a sort of a 3-story building, and the top story, sort of the second and the top story would be quite visible from the beach. The below is more of a sort of storage area or garaging space, and that would kind of be below that dune height from the beach.
Does that conclude questions from colleagues? That being the case, I'll formally move resolutions 12, 12A and 13 from the chair and seek a seconder. Thank you, Councillor. I've got a keen from Skinner as well as Rollo. Councillor Rollo is the Tahunanui councillor there, but Tim, you were in first if you would wish it, unless you'd like to pass it on.
So point of order, Mr. Chair. I don't even know if this is a point of order, but you're saying you're moving 12 and 12A at the same time. So this is exactly what I was talking about, where we're going to vote on whether you stand
I've given, I've given, can I just establish the seconder and then I'll come to your point of order. Councillor Skinner, did you wish to second or would you like to pass it on to Councillor Roll?
Happy to second. I take a great interest being a team stood at large, which means I've stood for regards.
Absolutely.
Like all the wards, including the Māori ward, all the wards, but I'm very happy because Campbell Road does an incredible job and then if you'd like to, I'm happy for them too.
No, very good.
Can I just
pleased to have you both. Can I just my plan, Councillor Pakipaki, was to have the debated one, but to put the three resolutions separately, and that was solely for the purposes of time. If we want to have three separate debates, we could do that. My concern is how that will drag the day out. Are you comfortable for me to proceed with a single debate and three votes?
Yeah, okay, but that just wasn't very clear when you said that we're going to take both of those under the same.
I didn't. Maybe that's fine.
12 and 12A.
So in speaking and exercising my right as
Can I just quickly do a point of order? Just to clarify, for 12A, I potentially have a conflict of interest, so do not wish to partake in that vote.
That's fine. We will note the conflict of interest with respect to 12A. My view is that you are, given I'm having the single debate, you are more than welcome to participate. But as a member of the club involved there, not to comment on the issues in 12A. In exercising my right as the mover of this motion, I think every councillor here acknowledges that Te Hunanui Beach is one of the absolute gems in this community of Nelson. It is regularly rated as not just one of the best beaches in New Zealand, but I've seen it referred to as one of the best beaches around the world, in that the beauty of the spot, the shallowness of the water, the way in which it is a place of enjoyment for young and old. And while it is a swimming beach, I want to acknowledge the actual very broad range of many other sorts of water activities that occur at the beach that involve a huge amount of enjoyment. Now, I was a young child that remember the old facility that existed on the beach and was subsequently lost back in the 1970s. And there are many in Nelson that regret the loss of that surf club facility that existed at that time. I'm one that says the benefits from a new Nelson Surf Life facility at our beach is firstly, if you have a high standard of facility, your capacity to be able to maintain those dedicated volunteers that improve water safety at our beach is substantially improved. The facilities that they have at the mine do stand up to their statement. Best beach, worst facilities. I think anybody that's been down there and observed the amount of messing around that's required to get the facilities to be able to set up their Surf Life Club from three different facilities is not adequate. And the report that this council commissioned reinforced that. The second point I would make is the Surf Life Club is a wonderful organisation for youth development. And I have seen that take place, not just in this community, around the country. I think Councillor Rollo would confirm that Te Hunanui is not the most socioeconomically advanced part of our community, and having a youth program in their community of which they can engage in, I think will be good for that community from that perspective. And I do not doubt for a moment, and I will bet any councillor around the table, that if we proceed with this facility, we will see this membership of that surf club surge. I remember the submission that was made by the club, by the fact that they actually could not expand their children's program simply for the shortage of space at that facility. And I'm absolutely confident that that will be true. The last point I would want to make is that the staff work with their consultants that they have done with the design of this facility, I think are truly superb. And I really would invite councillors to have a look at the concept design that has been developed with the task force that's been led by Councillor Skinner. My view, it is an outstanding building. I think, Councillor Rainey, when you see those drawings, you'll be excited as you are about the design of building that was very appropriately built for the Saxton Oval, which is a facility of which this council can be equally proud because it is being located on a place. I also note that it is my view that on the beach is a special place that you need a careful design of building, and we shouldn't be trying to locate a whole lot of things that don't need to be on the beach in the facility. The last point I'd make very strongly is this. We've been out in a public submissions process, and this new facility at Te Hunanui Beach had one of the strongest levels of support from the community. 68% of respondents supported its development, 677 people, more than 3 times the number that were in favour of the status quo. It would be extraordinary for us, having received that level of public support, for us not to get on and support its development. The one question in my own mind is that it is a big challenge for a voluntary organisation to raise 50% of the funding that's required for this facility. The fact that the government has subsequently announced a very large $42 million fund is, wouldn't we want to be making sure that our community was getting a share of that investment being invested in our community? And for all those reasons, I'm pleased to support the resolution and the staff recommendation. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, I'm comfortable to support this. I agree that it will likely become a much loved facility within the community. I would really like to see that it is available for broader community group use. I think that that's really critical. I also support Councillor Rainey's advocacy around this being a zero alcohol facility. So I look forward to the subsequent work that will be done on that. I think the design must be sympathetic to its environment and position. I think we definitely don't want to have an eyesore, and I guess the other consideration is we do need to be thinking about its resilience. So I hope that those kinds of considerations will be taken into the design and, you know, longevity and that kind of thing. And then I totally agree that if there's co-funding, government co-funding for it, we should try and snaffle as much of that as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sanson. I'll come to Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Yeah, fundamentally, I support the Life Surfing Club and the needs and the benefit that it has to the community. However, after reading the task force agenda with matters discussed and what document that was on the, whatever it is anyway, that talks about in the 1.2 project update, and it says the next steps further with the Surf Life Surfing Club is aligned further consultation of the development of the Tahuna sports facilities with the reserve management plan consultation and completing more in-depth investigation on the utilisation of sports grounds. And then it went into 1.3. It is noted that there is a balance of funds available from the budget for development of a business case that can be used for planning and consenting work for life saving facilities. And then it goes on about the search and rescue, and then it talks about removing the containers and stuff, as people have discussed already. Now, my thing is, when they presented their submission, and I felt there was a conflict between the submitters and what they wanted and what the expectations were, and it was very unclear. And I was hoping that as the staff presented their report today, that they would provide that clarity. Instead, they provided more vagueness as to who would own the building. Would it be a lease of the land or lease of the building? Who would be responsible for the costs? And would the statements made by the club about increasing membership and their projections truly be fulfilled without providing the evidence to support that? So based on the reflections of what was discussed in the previous matter around the artificial turf and the sentiments made by councillors at the table and the views around, is this the time? I'm sorry, but I'm going to use the arguments based from previous councillors on the previous item that this is not the time to be supporting and moving towards building a facility for the Life Saving Club. So number 12 and number 13 I do not support. However, 12A I do, for the simple reason that last term, under the previous organisational structure of the council with the community and sports committee and then to full council, it was identified that the changing rooms and the upgrades needed at the Tahuna Beach facility was actually left as a demand needed right then and there, and we ended up putting in a porta-cot building so that the female sports members could actually change and also participate in the sport that we were providing the grounds for, as they didn't have anywhere. So therefore, I do see the priority for 12A. I do think we do need a business case to see what is the actual needs of the wider area of Tahuna with the reserve management plan and what can actually benefit the Tahuna community. So while I do appreciate and certainly do support the hard work and the initiatives of the Nelson Surf Lifesaving Club, I do not see that as a priority for this council to be investing its money in this term, and I would rather have a Tahuna community business case of what is needed for our community, but I will support 12A.
Thanks, Councillor Pakipaki.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair. I'm a bit disappointed because Councillor Brand has stolen my thunder. It's like all my points are basic. Somehow she's copying my notes. So the ownership matter, but so I'll skip all of that bit and just go to really, like, I'm really supportive of a facility down there. I'm so supportive. This is probably for me going in the wrong direction because it's too prescribed. If there was an avenue for us to be able to extend this facility out to other groups within the community, that it can actually be more of a hub type thing, that I would be really supportive of it right now. And I think that to be consistent and have continuity in my position, I have to actually oppose number 12 because, as Councillor Brand said, this is not the time for this. The time is really now for something that extends beyond this, and it's too prescribed. You're right, the changing facilities at Tahuna Nui Beach, they really need to be upgraded. We've got so many sports and so many people that use, there's thousands of people that use those facilities down there, and we've got the worst facilities there, and we're just doing the same thing. We've got the Christmas tree and we're starting with the star on the top instead of making sure that the tree is decorated well all the way through. It's always the last thing you put on. That's a cherry. That's why they call it the cherry on the top. So, you know, I can't support 12 and 13. 12A, I am way behind, not behind, supportive of. And if only 12 reflected what the original direction, I'm looking at the early task force meetings, the narrative that was contained in those documents for a community sports hub to really incorporate it, then I could really get behind it. And that's no shun on the Nelson Surf Lifesaving Club. A good friend of mine, George Jones, was involved in the club as I was a child growing up, and I really loved and I would support what they do. I just think that, you know, our money is best spent to extend to a wider audience. So kia ora mai tata.
Councillor Rollo?
Thanks, Menik, and I note that I won't speak to 12A, but I will speak to 12 and 13. And note that just 3 days ago, the Nelson Surf Club were ranked for the second year in a row the Patrol Club of the Year in the Canterbury region, which is a huge credit to a group who literally don't seem to have any sort of facility. It amazes me how many rescues happen at that beach, and I am fully supportive of a zero alcohol facility because it doesn't go well with surf rescue. Look, we have an amazing community in Tahuna Nui, some pretty shit facilities if I'm honest, and it seems to be that we're creating a future plan with no real backing of what the plan is, and I know that we've got the RMP coming up, and I'll harp on about this, that we seem to have out-of-date information and stats around the community of Tahuna Nui, yet we have these wonderful plans on how we can get there. I'm going to support this. I look forward to it happening, and I welcome any of my colleagues to come to Tahuna Nui, and I will take you on a tour. We'll go to about 6 different cafes, and we'll really see what goes on in Tahuna Nui, because it's as I've said before, we have 2 sides of Tahuna Nui, and we have a state highway that goes through it, and sadly the state highway is what everyone knows about Tahuna Nui, and if we can't fix that, then we're going to have wonderful plans with no resource to move forward. So look, supportive of 12 and 13, and let's get on and create a good future plan for Tahuna Nui.
Thanks, Councillor Rollo. I'll have Councillor Rainey and then the Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry.
I support
For colleagues' information, it's my intention to carry this debate through to conclusion and then to break for lunch, just so that councillors are in the loop.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. I support all three of these. Just like to pick up Councillor Roll on a point that he just made. I thought that he said we have something facilities in Tahuna Nui. I can't remember what the exact word was, but I think it rhymes with fit or something like that. Yeah. Actually, council has invested heavily in Tahuna Nui, Te Pāhara Keke, Natureland, the significant improvements we've made to the picnic area, with the work that we're doing on the car park area with the area that needs to be remediated. There's a whole lot of stuff down there at Tahuna Nui that we spent significant funds on it. From time to time, we hear, oh, it's the forgotten area and we don't invest enough in that. Well, I take exception to that because in my experience sitting around this council table, there have been numerous occasions where we have indeed given support, thought and financial support to the Tahuna Nui beach area. In saying that, this is an essential suite of improvements that I think needs to happen. I'm interested in the final design. I'm interested in the final outcome, especially for the changing facilities. Whatever we do, it's got to look good, it's got to work well, and it's got to be in fitting with the surrounding area. So I do support all of this.
Thanks, Councillor Rainey. Over to the Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I echo Councillor Rainey's comments and actually just about every comment that's been made so far, and that I think this is one of the ones that I struggle with, not in terms of the concept or outcome, in which I think it is a brilliant project, and I think it would have great outcomes. I think this is one where I struggle with the process and the phasing. That's not to say that I won't be supporting this, but I will also be caveating my vote with that this is not the blanket go ahead, that there are decision points to come, annual plan to come before capital works are properly started in this proposal. And I think that that's really important because when you do a limited scope business case, the problem you're looking at will be the top problem you identify. If you're saying, what are the problems here, but only within this very small remit, then yes, the answer will come back and it'll be like, yes, this is the number one problem. Our job as governors is to look across the entirety of the city and go, how does this rank to every other individualized business case that we've done that also says that their problem is the biggest problem? And that's just a consequence of the way we do business. Do I think that in my ideal world, I would have us building this in year 2 and year 3? No. I don't think that it justifies the urgency between an initial investigation in this financial year through to construction. I just don't think it justifies that. Year 4, year 5, year 3, year 4 would be a lot happier with. And I think that that's a conversation, though, in terms of the detail that we can have at our next annual plan. And so I'm happy to support this. I do think we need to reflect in terms of the information that is formally presented to council in relation to the fact that we do have business case, we do have concept designs of actually that this is documentation that from a public understanding and transparency point of view should be being directly reported and tabled at this table. Because it is really important when we're making these decisions, especially when they come with a relatively short runway, that it is clear the process by which they've made it here. And so I'm excited by the potential. I think this could be an iconic facility. I am really supportive of the staff approach of only having facilities in that reserve that are crucial to be in that reserve. I do think that consideration needs to be given the default upfront cost of construction is to make sure that we're not missing off obvious things that could be included that we may be then looking to come back and put into that area not too far down the line that we could actually get efficiencies of scale by including it in this. But that is for the upcoming financial year and the detailed design that I hope we'll be able to look into this further. And finally, just a plug of, this isn't the only group without a home. As was initially tied to this investigation, we have critical organisations like Land Search and Rescue who are in incredibly degraded facilities that they can't accommodate the services that they provide to our region. We need to make sure that we're not picking and choosing winners. And we need to actually take a look around and say, where else are these holes? Where are these critical gaps? And when we're evaluating these things, we need to evaluate them holistically across all of the other priorities and all of the other problems that face our region.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. I fully support what we've got here. And as many know and may pain, I'm usually the first to try and cut something I think is not a priority. If we're going to have one thing, we can do about something else to make the books balance. But the more I've been involved with this, the more I've been convinced this is necessary. And if we are here making a decision without consultation, and there's often topics that just sort of in the balance, this is not in the balance. This is 70%, 68%, nearly 70% of a population of submissions said, please go ahead and construct a new facility for the Life Saving Club and upgrade the changing facilities. It wasn't a 50-50, it was a 70%. We don't often get that sort of majority. And if you're needing some direction on what your priorities are, that's damn clear, bloody damn clear what the priority is, regardless of what I think the priorities are. But yes, this is something that this organisation many people provide voluntary work. I go do a little bit down at Tahuna for various things, and other people do far greater. But this surf rescue is run entirely by voluntary groups. They're not doing it for a laugh. They enjoy the gains and putting into the community. And you only have to see in the last few years, we had 2 deaths down Tahuna Beach, people wading out. I think it was dark and it may, but Surf Life Rescue may not have been with that there made any difference. This was done in the night or late on the weekend, but we had 2 deaths down there. What I see is the greater aspect of having a Surf Life Rescue there, but can't be there 24 hours a day. It shows that the place is something you've got to be a bit careful about. It's somewhere kids especially get to learn, they get involved in these groups, they learn good swimming skills, good water safety skills. I know as a youngster and even as an adult, you can take for granted the rips and the way the water moves, and it's only from good people that put their time into it and show you where is safe and what's not safe. And it's great when you've got a family down there to know that it's between the flags. Also keep in mind, whether it be Coast Guard, Surf Rescue, etc., even though there's only one aspect of that, the region they cover is huge. It's like from Farewell Spit to the top of the Marlborough Sounds. I know this is looking at just at Tahuna Beach, but also keep in mind, we should be doing something for these good people. And as you know, as they presented, they'd be providing the utilisation of those rooms for other organisations as groups. But this is something for many a year, both to central government and to council, has said, hey, we need something down there. And I know we've battled and struggled with how and where and why we'd put it. The solution's been excellent, what they presented on the design, etc., and how to go about it, I thought was damn excellent. And then to see a letter that through central government, there's going to be some major funding towards such projects. You might be scared off by we providing just 50% or amount of 50%, but we put it as a cap. So by all means, I know our staff work hard. If we can get funding elsewhere, they grab it and run with it. So yes, this is a priority, and the public at 78% has said we want this. That's a go for me.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Any other contributions? Councillor Courtney.
Not much left to say, is there? Not much left to say now. It's all possibly been said, other than I would like to second the 2A about the changing facilities. I could second that if Councillor Rollo. I know, well, that's right. Well, you were seconding it, see?
I withdrew my use.
Anyway, that's an aside. We won't, I don't think we'll debate over that. Mayor Nick, as others have said, Tahunanui Beach is our biggest asset. And I won't say in counter to what Councillor Pete Rainey said, but I think it needs more attention, more love. But most important of all, safety for our swimmers is paramount for our council, I believe. And that beach, you know, brings so much pleasure to so many. And that's important too for our community's well-being. And I like supporting, and I think everyone else does, if possible, to support a project that benefits the most possible people. And this one does. So I'm very happy to support it and happy to second 2A if Councillor Rollo has to leave the...
The resolutions 12, 12A and 13 are all being moved and seconded by myself and Councillor Skinner.
Oh, I see, not Councillor Rollo. Okay.
Any other contributions? I'll just sum up with my right reply. Firstly, to respond to the questions about process. Council went out and got an independent report. It said the priority and an urgent priority was addressing the surf club facilities. That was a higher priority than some of the other issues, but was very supportive of the $50,000 that's included in 12A. There was at the beginning of the process a pretty open mind, certainly from me, about whether an integrated facility for both sports clubs and surf club was right. And I'm not surprised, but I didn't want to preempt the discussion that's occurred, and that says, actually, your surf club facilities to maximise the safety need to be on the beach, but we don't want to have any more facilities on the beach that we absolutely have to. And the consultant and the advice that we've received on that perspective, in my view, is very robust. Been a couple of questions about the exact ownership structure and the liquor licences. I remind the council, the decision that we're making today is to put it into the LTP, to put the funding to enable it to occur. And it's absolutely proper that those issues, and we've got a mix of ways of which we do that, it is not necessary at this point in the process to have had to lock down all of those details. In short, Nelsonians love our beach, our visitors love our beach. This is an urgent issue for us to resolve, as said by our consultants. We've got an exciting design that's been developed with staff. My view is we cannot progress this quickly enough for the benefit of all in our community. Now, my understanding is there's a request that each of the resolutions be put separately, and I'll now ask the Chief Executive, having had that indication, I'm assuming there will be a division required, and so I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to carry a division on items 12, 12A and 13.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Division on item 12, Councillor Anderson.
Yes.
Councillor Brand.
No.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Hodgson.
Aye.
Councillor Pakipaki. Oh. No. Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Three, is that 3 votes for you? Now, Councillor Rollo.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Councillor Stallard.
No.
Deputy Mayor.
Aye.
Mayor Nick.
Aye.
I have that 9-3. 9-3. Carried.
Can carry a vote. Can I just check? I'm not sure there's anybody indicating. Can I carry 12, see if I can get 12A on the voices? Those in favour of 12A, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. That is carried unanimously.
Just note that I didn't vote.
Yeah.
And just note, no vote from the, I'm just trying to be efficient. Is there any members that will want a division on item 13? I'll put item 13 to the vote collectively. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no.
No.
Do you wish to have a division, Councillor Brand?
No, it can just be recorded.
Thank you. It is my intention for us to now take a lunch break. Council will resume at 1:30 and thank councillors for their work this morning. Councillor June till 1:30 p.m.
There's a few things I wouldn't mind talking about. Let's have a working lunch, but as an informal.
Yeah. Going to revert to the record and publish tomorrow, so there's still a public record of what we have said. We move to item 14, the Arts Hub, and invite the relevant staff to come up to the table for questions, and would draw to council's attention the amendment that has been tabled by the Deputy Mayor. Sorry. Nikki's already there.
And Andrews?
So I might as well kick off with the first question. With the amendments that is proposed by the Deputy Mayor, by bringing forward the funding, as well as having the funding has a net impact of additional costs of the second item, the $20,000 operational expenditure, 25, 26, 26, 27. Is that correct? That's the impact on rates?
Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions? Councillor Sanson?
Are we it's question time. Can I ask a question about the amendment?
Yes, my intention is to have quite open questions about both.
So does it look like we're pushing $20,000 out a year? Yeah, well, that's good. Thank you.
So can we just get that clarity? Because that's a little bit different to what I thought I understood, and it's probably me. I'm just wanting to understand in moving to the Deputy Mayor's options, what's the fiscal ups and what's the fiscal downs in each year?
I can just briefly say, in terms of the 20,000, as is currently proposed in year 2 and year 3, there is 20,000 for additional rental prior to the purchase of a building in year 4 for the Arts Hub. This would be bringing forward that purchase into year 2, and so pushing out the additional funding tagged, the 20,000 tagged in year 2 into year 3, keeping that original funding there and shifting its allocation to be for basically the transition into that new building, something that we didn't originally allocate for, but is a very predictable expense that we will have.
I'm still between yourself and Nikki wanting to understand. If you pull the 1.7 million forward, that means you're paying interest on that amount of capital a year, 2 years earlier, because you're bringing it back by 2 years. And then you're allocating $20,000 in an operational expenditure starting from year 2. We previously, what did we have? I just want to get absolutely clear about what the net impact in numbers of the Deputy Mayor's proposition.
So yes, that's correct. The interest would start accruing from the time you take out the loan. So that would be earlier than you were expecting. There is money which it is now proposed to move to year 3. So you would, it's money that's allocated, but because it's coming now that you're also having interest, there is that additional cost. Originally, we just had OPEX, a couple of years of OPEX to help with the rent and then the purchase. Now we've got the purchase and we're moving the rental money to help with the purpose of the establishment.
In the draft, was there $20,000 for rental in 24-25?
25, it started in 25-26 and did 26-27. So now we've moved the 25-26, so you'd have 40,000 in 26-27.
So there's rental plus this?
Yes, except that the money that was rental is now for establishment. So you've got 40,000 of OPEX for establishment.
I'm still, can I answer the simple question? How much more money is the Deputy Mayor's proposal going to cost? No, there's the element of interest. You bring capital forward 2 years, I can work out interest on $1.7 million.
Yeah.
Is the second item additional or replacement?
It's not additional. It's accumulating it into a single year after you.
So the only extra cost of the Deputy Mayor's amendment is as a consequence of bringing the 1.7 million forward 2 years?
Yes.
Good. Sorry, just wanted to be clear. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, and just to help me out understanding that 20,000 was originally in there to offset or go towards rent. And you're envisaging if they have a building, they won't have that rent. So you're flagging that money, renaming it rather than rent as the costs of moving costs, which the money wasn't initially.
Yes, that's right. So it's for a different purpose now. It's proposed that 40,000 goes to a different purpose. It won't be needed for rent if there is use of that capital earlier for purchasing.
So it needs bring it forward. Okay.
Any further questions? Now, I'm wanting to speed up process with the explanation that I've had from staff and the Deputy Mayor, I'm perfectly comfortable with the Deputy Mayor's modification. There's a bit of gain on one in that you are spending one lot of $20,000 a year later. You're bringing the capital expenditure forward. Fiscally, it's pretty neutral. It's more in line with where they want to go. I would require the indulgence for us simply to allow the Deputy Mayor to move the alternative resolution unless staff, I'm assuming staff are quite comfortable with the amendment. Staff are. Just to speed up the process, with the leave of council, I would like the Deputy Mayor to be able to move his amendments as the opening resolution.
Sorry, was that alternative or additional?
Alternative. I will move the two resolutions in red on the screen.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sanson. Is there any debate?
I'll speak to this, which is just to say, we heard very clearly through submissions, significant support for the option outlined. But what we've also heard is that there needs to be a sense of momentum here. We've done significant work in terms of the arts strategy and the gaps analysis to identify this is a pressing need within our arts sector. We know the economic development benefits it brings. We know the social and cultural benefits it brings. I think bringing this forward is an important reflection of the fact that this work is being done and more work is being done as we speak. The consequence of leaving it out in year 4 is that we'll get a whole bunch of work done and then we'll sit on our hands for 3 years and have to redo a significant chunk of it. Or, which I think would be the more likely outcome, is we go, well, we don't want to do that. So in a few months' time, we're going to agree to bring it forward anyway. So I'm figuring we can, skip one of those steps and just when we're signing out our LTP, clearly signal our intention that with the work that's been done, we've already signaled that we want this to happen. Let's put the money in place where we can actually see it happen. And I think that this aligns when we look at the previous decision. We are wanting these medium scale projects, as was discussed early on in our LTP development, to be able to get them as first cab off the rank to just progress and deliver while still staying within a fiscally responsible mindset. In terms of the shift of the reallocation of the $20,000, that's really about the fact that moving costs aren't non-existent. We've already had to pay for when the refinery art space left from the old refinery building into the new one. Council put forward money to support that transition. Going into a new building will have a whole lot of costs. This is a relatively small contribution just to signal that actually transitioning is not always a cheap business, and this is money that we'll support to do this. But really, I think what we have is a super exciting proposal that has the potential to activate our city in a way that we will be able to look back on and see the benefits for years to come.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah. I'd like to second that. I spoke to Councillor Sanson. She's happy.
I was too eager. So I withdraw my second.
Welcome the support of Councillor Anderson as the seconder for the arts, and also want to acknowledge Councillor Anderson's work in this area. Any other contributions on the amended motion as proposed and seconded? Councillor Sanson?
Yeah, I'd just like to speak in support of this. I did send through a question to staff around the initial resolution, and I just had some concerns that the quantum of the fit out might be that there didn't seem to be any budget for the fit out, and that it, fit out can easily be the cost of a building, and I was worried that that might be beyond the capacity of the arts community. But I'm comfortable that this goes some way, even just a little way, towards resolving that, and that there is still plenty of time for the broader community to get behind this project, and hopefully to envisage, or for the arts community to envisage what they want that fit out to look like, and hopefully to get broader community and philanthropic support for it. So really
Councillor Sanson, any other contributions? I appreciate, I'm going to bribe people with a mayoral coffee shout if we can keep other items as short as this. including the Deputy Mayor not exercising his right of reply. That being the case, let's put the resolutions that have been provided on us. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried. We move to item number 15 and 16. Yes, if officers come before. I'm sorry to do this. I understand we've overcome our technology problem. We can go back onto Zoom, but it does mean we just need to pause for a minute. So just a 1 minute pause while we allow our technology to get us back onto Zoom.
Sorry, question was the media want to join.
Oh, okay. Hey, look, I've misinterpreted my instructions. We'll try again. Because of us being unable to get our normal public link up, we have had a request from the media for them to be able to join the Zoom link that is normally reserved for council officers or advisors. Given the technology circumstances, I am supportive of the media being able to do that, which will enable them effectively to be able to watch our deliberations. Can I check, is there any councillor that would object? It's normal procedure that we would not, that is reserved for councillors or staff advisors linking in. Is there any objection to the media being able to use the Zoom link to be able to observe our deliberations? Councillor Stenson.
I'm wholly supportive, and actually TDC allow it, so I kind of think maybe it's an area we should be considering further.
So the answer, we're not going to deal with the broader standing issues, but with the technology issues today, yes is the answer, and we'll proceed on that basis. Okay, let's come to item 15 and 16, and let's start with questions from officers.
I'll throw out a question. This is around the bridge to betterment, isn't it? And the reallocation or reassignment of car parks to help during that work happening in the interim, isn't it?
So through the chair, earlier at beginning of last month, I believe, a report was brought to go through the Bridge to Better project, in which it was agreed that a 2-lane design would be used. As part of that, it was referenced that some parking had also been considered in relation to the Paraperu site, which would also be deliberated at this meeting. So yeah, there is a link there as well.
Question, Councillor Sanson.
So did we consult on the Paraperu Road car park through the LTP? No, so it wasn't referenced at all? Because I thought I'd missed it, but it wasn't there. Okay.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hodgson.
Have we had any communication regarding the Trafalgar Centre and how this might be beneficial for their operations?
Actually, I can probably answer that better than you, maybe, because I've certainly been a number of discussions with the manager of CLM and my other duties, but certainly Mark has mentioned to me that it's their single most common complaint, the lack of parking for big events at Trafalgar Centre. So it's something that they would be certainly keen for us to explore. And they've said that look, increased parking would mean that they could hire the facility out more often. I did mention, what about parking on grass? And they said, look, they've observed that and it does result in damage, and it's difficult to present it to become muddy. So, and look, if they are aware of the play park and the potential conflict that may have with people going to the park, they might start parking in their parking. And so look, bottom line is CLM would very much support additional parking for that particular facility.
Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Just a question around that. I'm assuming that most of those kinds of big events, basketball and concerts and that kind of stuff, usually happen in the evening. Would that be correct?
Through the chair, there have been a number of occasions where there have been daytime events and we've had to sign and manage under traffic management that the people who would normally park there, commuters, need to find somewhere else. So that does happen on occasion during the day.
Okay, but I think, but that we do have a massive car parking square at Montgomery Square, which is just an 11-minute walk away as well, don't we?
Through the chair, that's correct, although Montgomery is paid parking.
In the evening?
No, not in the evening. I was talking about daytime, sorry.
But when there's, and I've been to regular Giants basketball games, even in the last couple of months, and the entire grassed area is covered up with cars, who pays for the cost to the damage? Often I've seen it get pretty muddy and ugly. Is that paid by CLM? Is it paid by the event where there is damage to the grass? Do we have any idea what that's costing us? Parks Department pays for the repairs after those events where you get the troughs and the parking there. Trudy and then Campbell.
Thanks. Just on that, what level of maintenance cost does come up and how often to repair the grassed area that gets used as the overflow car park? And would that then be reduced if it was changed to other material?
Through you, Mayor Nick, I can't actually answer that question, but I imagine we're probably spending thousands of dollars a year on remediation of that land, but I wouldn't know for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. And given this parking is, I guess the basis of it is to set aside when the work happens on Bridge Street, is the idea that this would be paid parking or is it free parking for the city?
It's very good, through the chair, very good question. My understanding is that it would be free parking.
Okay, and a quick sup on that. Do we have any idea how many car parks we are likely to fit in that area if we are to seal it?
So through the chair, in our report, we've provided a number of options. There's 37 car parks, 52 car parks, or 18. There's a variety of costs on page 39. So we were looking to go with a chip seal car park. So placeholder funding of about 1.25 million, which would go up to approximately 80 car parking spots.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Skinner.
We've got the grass area there, which I think works well, but maybe it doesn't. And that was a reason for having that grass area for overflow. We're saying that that does not suffice. It seems like a lot of money. I'm all for car parks, but it seems like a lot of money for 13, 50 or 80 parks.
So through the chair, you're right, that area or a portion of it is very much an overflow car park. Effectively, it's not all weather, so not an all year round asset. So if you look at it in the winter times, it's quite muddy.
And you think that's, I suppose, how you sort of weigh it up. You think that is very beneficial for times. Obviously, there's times when it's not great for parking. There's times it's brilliant, but for the cost, you think that sort of weighs up if you're looking for other alternative means of providing capacity.
I'm not sure it's fair to ask David that question because he's more of a pipes person than a roads person. And
I'll give him credit for more person,
but look, I'll try and answer that question. Look, as Chief Executive, I do think this is we're putting an amount of money in the budget to do a proper look at what is the right thing to do. And a number of you have raised a number of possibilities that we could. There are different options. Yep. I'd like us to be able to have that option to be able to consider this. Yep. I do think it's worthwhile. There is lots of car parking Bridge to Better. There is a demand from the play park. There's a demand from CLM and utilising that thing. So I do think this is a good project. I would like to think about it more. Do we charge? How do we get through it? But I'd like to put the money in the budget to give us those options.
Well explained, thank you.
All right, I'll move from the chair and potentially if the deputy mayor is congenial to include his resolution with respect to the principal, or did you want to move that as an amendment? So how about I move resolutions 15, 16 plus the O'Neill Stevens as one amendment, and would the deputy mayor be prepared to second? Thank you. In speaking to the motion, the first thing is Trafalgar Centre is a tremendous facility, but I am a little bit disappointed about the level of usage that it gets. And when I talk to the manager of the Trafalgar Centre, this issue of the parking around it is one of the issues that results. For instance, I was advised by the home show people that they chose to have that at Saxton rather than in our central city. And if we're serious about getting more events into the central city, we should do so. I accept that you can sort of park on the lawn, but I tell you it's rather chaotic. I've had some nasty frights in parking at night time going to Giants games in the grassed area where there is a swarm of kids and cars and everything in the chaotic zone. And I don't think that is particularly satisfactory. And I do think we should take the professional advice of the manager of the Trafalgar Centre. A broader concern that I have is I'm reasonably satisfied about the level of parking that we have in our city for our shoppers. And if we look at the parking data, yes, sometimes we run out, but not very often. But when I talk to the people that are investing millions of dollars in Richmond in commercial buildings, taking professional services, lawyers, surveyors, accountants, and I say, why are you doing that? They say because there is insufficient parking in the city for workers. And I think if we're really serious about stopping that drift of investment out of Nelson, we do need to address the question of worker parking. And I'll bet you if you go down there right now to the Trafalgar Centre, there will be a substantial number of workers, and I suspect a few Nelson City Council staff who use that space in the daytime. And I think it addresses that need as well. I'd also note that I'm super excited about the work that Councillor Hodgson is doing on the playground. And the mission that I think we have collectively given to the task force on the playground is to create the best playground in the top of the south. And I want the families from St Arnaud, from Dovedale, from Rockville, from Collingwood attracted to coming into that playground, having a ripper time with their kids, and then going shopping, and then doing some hospitality. And while I'm delighted with the gains that we're making with our bus service, for a significant number of those communities in the top of the south, they will be coming by car. And my worry is that if we want the playground to be successful, good parking facilities adjacent to it will be part of what's required for it to be successful. The last part for me is about the good faith that I want this council to build both with the commercial community and also with our residents. And in the messaging that we got from Bridge to Better, one of the messages from the business community is that we've got them on board for Bridge for Better, which I think is tremendously exciting for the city. But one of their key concerns is that that project will result in a loss of parking. We've given assurances that we're going to deliver more parking in response, and that is part of the good faith process if we're going to get that boost in confidence for investors. And the last thing I'd note is that when the council in 2019 went out and asked our community about the question of revitalising our city, our own city council survey said that the question of parking was actually one of the key questions for them if they were going to come and shop into our city. I'd conclude by saying in the debates about the issues of parking and transport, I am an and, not an or person. That is, I want us to do the buses well. I want us to build that improved bus hub. I want us to grow those services. I want us to build more cycleways. But I also take on board the fact that 92% of journeys in our city and region are by vehicle. And if we're serious about revitalising the city, we need to make the city work for all of those transport modes and not just one or two. And that's why I'm strongly supportive of the resolutions that we have to enable us to be able to help the Trafalgar Centre and help get the direction right around revitalising our city. Councillor Pakipaki.
Just to be clear, we're in debate at the moment?
We are.
Fantastic. Right.
And we're debating all three of
How
those
privileged are we that we, through our activities, require a car park so adjacent to our activities that it removes our need to actually walk to those events. I spent some time in Brisbane, and Suncorp Stadium has no parking around there. It is impossible to get a park, but that place is frequented by thousands and thousands of people because of the public transport system. And haven't we just invested in a whole lot of money in our public transport system to actually help facilitate that? One of the things that was argued was that our park that James is involved with, we're all involved in, this playground, was argued that by putting it down at Rutherford Park, it's going to be too far away to benefit the retail sector in the inner city. That was used as an argument against it. Now we're saying that we're going to have people parking down there so that it'll benefit the retail. So we can't have it both ways in that argument. I also like to think about the Cape Town and Wellington and the old Jade Stadium. They never had car parking right next to it. And we have this idea that we're a sporting, active, healthy group of people or a community, but we can't walk the 3 blocks that it takes to adequate parking that we've got in the city to be able to access one of our best assets. So long as our access community are being taken care of in terms of their ability to get down there, I see absolutely no problem with looking at the car parks that we've already got in town here as a sort of a draw. When people go to the Trafalgar Centre, they have to walk back into town, and incidentally there just happen to be restaurants and other parts of that retail community that can take advantage of that. By suggesting also and grafting in this whole idea about the Bridge to Better program is going to require the car parking down there. This is really expensive. Man, $1.25 million for this project, I think, Mr. Chair, is an expensive way for us basically to pay for people not to have to walk an extra couple of blocks. And I would like to encourage the community to actually think about that, because we're so privileged in our thinking that we are sitting here saying that we need to be within 100 metres of a facility to be able to actually access it. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't have those access problems. So it's a good idea for me to get on my bike and walk, so to speak. Kia ora.
Other councillors? Councillor Rainey and then the Deputy Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Rainey. I had to get up very early this morning and it's showing. Councillor Sanson.
I think I'm just gently asking for a personal vote.
Sure. The Deputy.
Thank you. And I think one of the challenges we have here is in the broadness of which this potential additional parking is being discussed as a somewhat silver bullet to commuter parking, to fringe parking, to parking at the Trafalgar Centre, to parking for a playground, to offsetting parking on Bridge Street. It can't and it won't be all of those things to everyone. And that's where I'd actually entirely agree with Councillor Pakipaki's debate in terms of parking near stadiums, and we see it all the time in larger centres where the US has gone down this horrific model of oftentimes the car parks surrounding their stadiums are significantly larger than the square meterage of the stadiums themselves. It's seen an absurd situation to get into and creates these islands of activity, desolate and disconnected from the rest of the city. That's something we absolutely want to avoid. I feel like I've used this exact same approach, and maybe it's just that I view every issue like parking in my discussion about the artificial turf, which is what we need to do is we need to identify the problem. We then need to take the lowest cost options to address that. And then should that fail, you build more infrastructure or increase supply. But you always take your lowest cost, easiest, lowest hanging fruit options first. And that's exactly what our parking strategy says to do. And that's why drafted the additional resolution, because we can't look at increased supply without looking at all of the other mechanisms we have to manage parking. I'd almost suggest that we need a right park, right place task force, because that's fundamentally the question here, which is where is the right use of our parking squares? Where do we want people to be parking for the different activities they have? And that's where we consistently see at the moment an issue with pressure on our city fringe from commuters parking where we currently have unregulated parking walking into town. Now that can be an entirely appropriate use, but unregulated, it becomes a serious issue for residents there. What we need to be doing is looking holistically across the way we are doing parking management and actually understanding how we can shift and drive the types of behaviour change to the locations we want it to be. And I reflect on some of the comments made at our City Revitalisation Summit, suggesting that actually we should be removing far more parking from within the city centre and putting it out onto the fringe, because it was degrading the value, particularly looking at our major parking squares, of the retail space. That's to say that this is a complex, really interesting and fascinating relationship. As anyone who's ever had the misfortune of discussing parking with me knows, I can talk a lot about, because these aren't simple things. And so why I'm supportive of this is actually just giving us, as we lead a conversation about the transformation and the revitalisation of our city centre, as we lead a conversation about the reallocation of road space towards active travel modes, that we have tools in our toolbox to shift that demand to the most appropriate location. And actually, I think that this is potentially a location that has merit in taking on some more of that demand, provided we're using the levers to shift it from where it is currently being used inappropriately. Finally, just want to touch on the notion of ring fencing and the history of parking and the commercial differential is just to say that actually we should be making the case that this is money that's going back into enhancing and making our city centre a wonderful place to be and to spend time. And so feels weird, I know, for me supporting a resolution of $1 million towards a car park, but that's because I think this is a conversation that needs to be active and continuing and needs to be seen in the wider holistic context of every other consequential decision that we can and should be making from this point. And so maybe my reasons are slightly different from Mayor Nick's at times, but on this one we've landed in a similar place.
An unholy coalition.
Yeah. The only other comment I'd make is the slight wording change to be additional car parking, essentially giving the wider remit to consider that the parking in that space of what is the most appropriate, whether it's a single car park, whether it's dedicated parking for the play space and as part of it, some for commuter, some additional car parking for the stadium or for itself, but just giving the flexibility to actually, again, take a step back and look at the wider implications of parking management, as I so love to do.
Councillor Hodgson.
I'm really surprised to find myself agreeing wholeheartedly with the Deputy Mayor when it comes to car parking. I'm not going to debate this for a long time. I think some excellent points have been made, but yeah, very supportive of this.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Nick. And just to clarify, the amendment, is this like 16B? Or is it replacing 15 and 16? What's going on there?
Could our staff, I think the appropriate notation for it should be 16A. Our officers will tidy up that when the minutes are done to give the numbering correct. And there may be some change in numbering as a consequence of the earlier media when we split resolutions. Okay. But for the purposes, we have one resolution. If I got an indication from councillors that they'd like to take them separately, I'd be happy to do that as well. But I think we should refer to the last resolution as 16A, please.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so this is an issue that does require evidence, I believe, mainly parking data, of which we've seen very little. But we did have some data from the 6th of December last year, which showed that during the peak of the day, there was, in the central city, there was 65% capacity of full, so 35% remaining, which is 380 odd spare car parks at that time. We don't have data for the existing car park at Parapara Road, but I did go down there on my bike 2 days this week, And on one day it was 30% full, so there were 100 spare car parks, and another day it was 50% full, so 72 spare car parks. So I guess if we were thinking about, do we need this extra parking today, we would hopefully consider those data that show we're below capacity in the central city, below capacity at the existing car park in Parepare Road during the day. So I think if our logic is to build a new car park there, to enable people to visit the new playground and so on, I would hope that the existing car park there could be proven to be insufficient to meet the demand. And I'm not sure that's the case yet. If we're going to employ the logic that we will build a new car park on Parepare Road because it's close enough to Central City that commuters can park there and walk to Central City, then the reverse logic must apply, as Councillor Pakupaki said. For an event in the evening at Trafalgar Centre, when there's high parking demand, the large, very large car parks at City Centre are completely empty. And perhaps the solution to that is more education and information to people. Say, come to town, come to the event, park in these wonderful large car parks, enjoy the short stroll down Trafalgar Centre, even if you like, come across the crossing here and along the Riverside Walk, and then afterwards you go back into town and enjoy something to eat, something to drink before you go home, and make an evening of it. And there's, unlimited parking in the evenings in the central city, as someone said, about 11 minutes walk away. So I'm not sure that providing, spending $1.25 million to enable people just to spill over during the evenings for events at Trafalgar Centre is a good use of money. Finally, I'm always aware with these decisions about the impact of the phenomenon of induced demand. So by making these decisions, we're sort of putting in place a path into the future that we're locking something in. And I think there's quite a healthy tension once you get close to capacity in some of these systems where people start to think, oh, it might be a bit hard. I'm going to take the bike, or I'm going to share a car with my neighbours, or I'm going to take the bus. It might be hard to get a park there. There's nothing wrong in my mind with that thought process happening for people. And I think it encourages different ways of thinking, because this car park, to me, it's the case where there are a whole suite of problems that we cannot solve by using the same way of thinking that led to the problem in the first place. And to me, this falls into that category. So I won't be supporting these motions. Thank you.
Other contributions? Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Minik. Did we not give a commitment to the businesses in the city centre at the time we were communicating or meeting with them over the Bridge to Better project? My memory tells me that we did.
Yeah.
That they would not see a loss of any car parking in the central city would be replaced in some way. So just help me with that, Minik, would you please? Can you help me with that? Can you tell me whether that was in fact, can I ask a question in the middle of this?
My understanding it is, but it may not be for me to say. I'd be happy, and I think the standing orders do allow during debate a matter of clarification. Is the Chief Executive able to clarify, or a staff member? I think it was in the context, Councillor Courtney, of the Bridge to Better conversation.
Yes, was, yeah.
What's the Chief Executive's understanding?
I'm not sure I can give a formal response, but my understanding is there was a broad understanding that that loss of parking on Bridge Street would be offset, and that's what we've been communicating to businesses and others, that there would be offset parking. So that's a broad understanding, and that's what I've been discussing with a number of elected members. That's my understanding, but I don't think there's an official Bridge to Better. We will formally do that.
Thanks for the clarification. The floor.
Oh yes, I really appreciate that. Thank you to the Chief Executive. So we've made a commitment. We've given an undertaking, and we've got these people behind us, really truly supporting us on this initiative, this fresh and exciting initiative for Bridge Street. And so I think we've got to follow through with that and honour that commitment, because we've given it and they're expecting it. So that's my...
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Any other contributions? I'll just exercise my right of reply. In responding to Councillor Pakupaki, I often hear the dialogue where people make comparisons with very large cities like Brisbane and Suncorp Stadium. And the fundamental difference is that Suncorp Stadium supports an urban population of about 3 million people in Brisbane. Actually, a large portion of the population that I want coming into the city, and that real vision statement that we agreed at the beginning of the LTP process was to ensure that Nelson is the centre for the top of the south. And the reality for a very large share of the geography of the top of the south is that the car will and remain the primary way for people to get around. I do also want to reinforce, because it is with some disappointment, that I've noted the more than $50 million worth of investment at Junction and a number of businesses moving from our central city out to that Junction facility. And when I talk to those businesses and they say to me, why are you relocating out to the Junction? One of the number one reasons they give me is parking. And I do say to this council, if you need to listen to those people that make investment decisions in our city. I remember when the Christchurch Hospital development was done, and there was a view that says, oh, look, if we don't provide parking around Christchurch Hospital, we'll change people's mode of transport. It was a disaster, and the government has had to come back in and actually provide proper parking around those facilities. We as councils and public providers need not to wish for a view of the world that we would like, but rather work in the world as it is. And I quite frankly, on a pouring night going to a Giants game, expect family with their young children to park their cars, and whether it be Montgomery or Whakatu or Buxton Square, and to walk in the rain, those people will stay home and our community will be poorer for it. And the last thing I'd say to you is I'm actually really excited about the shift in attitude towards our city with the summit. The investments that have been made by Connings, by Save More and Good For, all in Whakatu. And every one of those businesses have said one of the reasons we are prepared to invest in that part of the city is because they've got that security of good parking. And so I say again, I do think that if we want to get the very best out of that huge $20 million investment plus in that facility of the Trafalgar Centre, we want more events there and we want people invigorating that area, then we need to be able to provide for people to get there and to get there conveniently, and this initiative is part of that picture. Now, can I just have a clarification? Are members happy for me to take all three resolutions, 15, 16 and 16A as one? Or would members prefer that I separated the resolutions? If I don't have an indication, I'll just put them as one. Those in favour, please say aye.
I called for I did ask for a division.
Sorry. Yes.
Are we taking a division?
Yes.
On all three?
On all three.
Yeah.
And so I'll now ask the Chief Executive to carry out a division.
Just a clarification on all three?
Yes.
Together?
15, 16, 16A together.
Councillor Anderson?
Aye.
Councillor Brand?
Aye.
Councillor Courtney?
Aye.
Councillor Hodgson?
Aye.
Councillor Pakipaki? Aye. Councillor Rainey?
Apology.
Which one's it?
I'm not here. Yeah,
No,
okay.
One is remote.
Councillor Willow?
I'll see where they.
Councillor Sanson?
No, sorry.
Councillor Skinner?
Aye.
Councillor Stallard?
No.
Deputy Mayor? Aye. The Mayor Nick?
Aye.
9 to 2. 9 to 2.
And can I please, sorry, I should have done this earlier. At lunch break, Pete Rainey noted as an apology for an hour, and I'd like that recorded, that he formally did apologise for the lunch break. He did have another commitment. We come to item number 17, and I'm happy to take questions of staff of the resolution with respect to the Montreal Princess Drive and the submission we received on the specific issue of the upgrade of that intersection. Thanks, David. Marg, any questions from colleagues? It's been moved by Councillor Rollo. I'm happy to second from the chair. I would thank staff for their prompt work. We had a quick discussion when the submission was made, and I'm encouraged and impressed by how quickly staff have responded in coming up with a pretty good practical solution. particularly given the potential for us to be able to move forward housing.
Can we just have a moment to read
Yes.
the new thing?
A question from me to start would just be, can you explain the changes in the waste minimisation fund resolutions?
Sorry, through the chair. So that should be a separate discussion.
All right.
Thank you.
We're dealing solely with
I'm happy to do all this.
the resolution has been moved by Councillor Rollo. It's been seconded by myself, including the amendments that have been added. Unless there is any further discussion, I'm going to put the resolution on that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary say no. Thank you for your efficiency. We now come to resolution number 18, which is with respect to the city centre revitalisation feedback. Invite staff.
So I think that resolution that's been bumped is in relation to what's in the report, but we don't currently have a resolution on.
Can we get the resolution
kitchen
back up
waste
on the screen,
service.
please? Sorry, Mr Deputy Mayor, where do you think?
I believe that resolution is in relation to the kitchen waste service item as outlined in the report.
So through the chair, if I could possibly help clarify. So there was no resolution in relation to solid waste in the agenda. However, officers identified that there was a discrepancy with the funding from MFE, and where this sits within the agenda order, it would have been here if it had been identified earlier.
So we've got no other information on this resolution?
No, that's correct.
I tell you what I'd like you to do is I'm a bit uncomfortable about springing it on people. What I'd like you to do is to circulate it with an explanatory note, and I would like to have it as a second item agenda tomorrow morning, please. Can we move to item as per the agenda, and that is with respect to resolution 18 on the City Revitalisation Fund, and I understand Nikki, who is the, oh, I'm sorry, Mandy and Gareth. Colleagues, any question or discussion on this resolution? Councillor Brandt.
Yeah, it's just a clarification there, Mayor. Says here for the city centre revitalisation and proposed community led, but in our discussions, it also included the waterfront task force as part of that 100K. So why is that not included in this resolution?
The reason is if you read the wording carefully, it is absolutely clear that the 100,000 is for the two task force in-house. But because the other one is a community one, you need to quite explicitly say it. So your point is a fair one, and that is you want reassurance that the $100,000 operating expenditure for city revitalisation could be for including the task force being led by the Deputy Mayor, could be used by the task force being led by Councillor Courtney, but it needs to explicitly slate the community one because it is out of house.
Okay, so you don't need to then name the two other task forces in that, so it is explicitly clear that it covers all three.
I think it's implicit, but
I don't think it is.
More than the reason I think it's implicit and why they, our officers, and I'll be happy for them to answer, have added the words on the end is it is a little bit unusual where you've got an organisation that's not legally within the control of the chief executive, where the other two are. But I'm happy for officers to do it, and if there was a strong wish around the table to make that plain, I'm perfectly relaxed. Do staff have a view, either Gareth or Mandy?
I personally would be comfortable either way. I think it isn't. I think it does, as the Mayor has outlined, demonstrate that it is the two internal task forces and the external one, and we need to separate that out because it will be providing some funding externally. But if you wanted to amend it to say the names of all three task forces, it achieves the same outcome.
Okay, I appreciate that. I don't think it is clear because it says city centre revitalisation feedback, and it then talks about city revitalisation initiatives. That does not include the waterfront. It doesn't say it includes that other task force.
I think,
We have stipulated it was all three.
I think if there's been some level of confusion, it's better to have clarity of language. Can I suggest wording expenditure for city revitalisations for each of the task forces, or for each of the 3 task forces that have been established? Doesn't need to say by council, the 3 task forces that have been established. Would that satisfy Councillor Brand? Yeah, thank you for that. I'll come to Councillor Courtney and then Councillor Sansom.
I think Councillor Brand makes a very good point, and my contribution would be on this matter. I know you've just about settled it yourself, Mayor Nick, but for city and waterfront revitalisation initiatives, just add and stormwater and waterfront revitalisation initiatives. City and
Yes, I think because there's a loose definition about the city, better to be explicit. And so make it plain that it is city and waterfront revitalisation initiatives. Councillor Sansom.
Mine was pretty much the same. I was going to say city and haven revitalisation initiatives.
Yeah.
That was the name of the task force.
The City Revitalisation Summit did include issues around the waterfront, but I agree with colleagues, and that is better to be explicit. So the better language is helpful to us. Are there any other questions for officers? I'm happy to move this resolution from the chair. If there was a seconder, thank you, Councillor Brand. As the amender, that resolution is now open for debate. There being no debate, Councillor Pakipaki.
Kia ora, I think this is a good thing.
The briefest comment of the day, for which he earns himself a free coffee from the mayor. All right. So I will put resolution number 18. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no carried. Let's come to item number 19, Tasman Environment Trust. Welcome, Mandy.
I'm just going to step away because of an interest. My partner is Department of Conservation Conservation Board appointee on the Tasman board. It's non-pecuniary and I feel quite comfortable that I can make an unbiased decision, but still.
I think we should note that in the minutes that Councillor Sansom acknowledged a conflict of interest with her husband's involvement in the trust.
And interest.
Yes, interest in the trust. So on this example, can we bring the resolution up so that we've got the full amendment there as well, so people can see the full? It was up on the screen and we didn't have the full amendment that's there, please, so that people can see fully what is there. And we're at the stage of questions, and I'm happy to take questions. My simple understanding is that if we proceed with Councillor Stallard's amendment, the net additional cost to the taxpayer is $60,000, i.e. 10 extra in year 1, and then the amount of 20 in year 2 and 30 in year 3, and then from then on it is the same. So it's an additional expenditure of $60,000 from council to the Tasman Environment Trust if we accept it. Am I correct in that assumption about the finances? No, it's 40. Correct. Someone's done their maths sharp than I. Having a slow day. Additional $40,000 over those 3 years. Any other questions?
I just have a question, Mr. Chair. Just the increase. What's the I don't know. This gets directed at Councillor Stallard, but how was what's the extra being measured against? What was the reason for that?
If it's a question to Councillor Stallard, I want to be pretty informal. Happy for him to answer it. Equally, when he moves his amendment, he may explain the rationale for it.
Clarification.
And entirely up to you, Councillor Stallard. probably keep it informal.
Sure, what's the question again? Councillor Pickett?
Oh, just the increase, what's that been, what's the basis for it?
I'm happy, if you're okay, I'll speak to that in debate.
Yeah, I think that's.
Well, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't, if it's not an arbitrary amount, then if you've got something in-
We're in the question phase of staff, just so that we can get absolutely clear in our minds as to what's being proposed. That's the purpose at this stage. Councillor Hodgson?
Maybe a question for staff. I should just go back to the report. It might be in there, but what's the basis for the proposed amounts that staff have put in the report today?
So through the chair is to better enable projects that the Tasman Environmental Trust can operate within the Nelson region. Projects aren't identified to date, but we expect that over time things will ramp up.
Can I just ask a question?
Certainly.
Sorry. So where did the numbers come from is a question that probably leads on, or sorry, should have led forward on my other question. You know, what are these based on?
So through
These were the numbers that were discussed at the workshop.
Okay. So where did they come from?
So
I don't recall at the workshop, actually me asking or anyone asking that question.
So my understanding is 40,000 is currently provided by TDC. So the Tasman Environmental Trust will eventually be equally supported by Tasman and Nelson to do projects throughout the region.
Can I indulge Councillor Paki and be a bit more, provide a little bit more information, because I don't want staff being put on the spot. I had a chat with Mayor Tim King, and it was in the broader context of the relationship between the Tasman and Nelson councils, and with respect to the Economic Development Agency, of which there is some collective frustration at this council that there's quite a disproportionate level of funding. And I said to Mayor King, who has positively said to me he thought it would be a good thing for Nelson City Council to be involved with the Tasman Environment Trust. And I said to Tim, well, if we were to phase our fund up to the same level of yours, would that help you persuade your council to address the anomaly on the Economic Development Agency? And I'll just quote Tim directly, wouldn't guarantee it, it would certainly help. And so out of that informal discussion with Mayor King, knowing that councillors around this table would like to see that, I did mention to staff that some phasing over 3 or 4 years might be helpful in terms of the broader relationship. There not being any question in my mind, and this is where I'm on the same page as Councillor Stallard, and it's really just a discussion about the timing, that long term we would like to be both equal members on the Tasman Environment Trust and equal funders with Tasman.
Didn't really sort of clarify it for me. What I'm wanting to know is that, is this a number, because obviously we're matching them, that's cool. How they came up with that number, it's just, I always like to know, you know, has that been a discussion with the organisation, say we need this amount of money, or have we just said, look, this is what we can afford to give? If either way, it's no big problem, just so that long as I know that it's that's the pathway that we've come from.
I met with the Tasman Environment Trust earlier this year when they were proposing to make changes to their constitution, both in terms of their name and including a representative from the Nelson City Council that I will be bringing to the next council meeting. In the course of that discussion, they said, look, we do not expect Nelson City Council to pay the same level of funding as Tasman, but if over time you could lift up to that level, then would you be open to that? At the meeting I had with the Tasman Environment Trust, to be fair to Aaron, because I think Aaron was at the meeting, there was no specific timetable, but basically the conversation went along the lines of, yes, we're sympathetic to being part and on equal terms, we're a bit tight for money, we'll probably have to phase it over a few years. And they were very supportive and excited about that prospect. Councillor Brand.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just on the breaking it down a bit more, because you brought up the parables with other funding being on par between the TDC and Nelson City Councils, on other funding where that has been, we've contributed higher than TDC, part of the TDC requirement was that the money that was contributed was put towards initiatives in their region. Is this, because it's got operating costs to projects to be identified in the Nelson area, are we just doing it to the current operating costs, or are we doing it specific to initiatives that would be appropriate projects in the Nelson area?
And I'm happy, Mandy, if you're able to answer, but I'm happy to address it if you wish. In the context of the meeting I had with the Tasman Environment Trust, they have a budget annually of about $4 million. They have, my information, have done about 5 projects. My understanding is that if we pass this resolution, we would then ask Mandy and her staff to then sit down with the Tasman Environment Trust and to come to an agreement around the funding and what we would get for that, consistent with the projects being identified in the Nelson area in the resolution.
Yes, just to confirm that, yes, it would be Nelson-based projects, and currently there is some funding going to the trust for some work currently, but additional funding will expand that.
So what is our current level of funding that's going to that?
So it's 10,000 for some Waka Puaka riparian planting, I believe, at the moment. Yeah, that's annual. And in the past, they've also had an environmental grant for 20,000 for a particular project.
Any other questions? That being the case, what I think the way we'll handle this is I'll move the resolution under 10 and seek a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Pakipaki. I'm going to then allow a mover and a seconder's speech, and then allow Councillor Stallard to move his amendment. In moving this resolution, I think it is an exciting development, both in terms of community-based environmental initiatives and the level of cooperation between Nelson and Tasman for the governance structure and the base funding for the Tasman Environment Trust to be extended into Nelson. For any ecological purposes, whether it be the issues of pest management and others, for so many purposes, Nelson and Tasman are an integrated environmental unit. The real question is only one of how quickly we should phase our funding up. I acknowledge Councillor Stallard's amendment that would make it more quickly, and that's just a simple trade-off between how much cost you're prepared to incur in front. My view is the level of funding that's been provided in the recommendation of phasing it up over 4 years has 2 advantages. One, in the period of which the council is under quite extreme financial pressure with very large rate rises, it's $40,000 less over the next 3 years. And secondly, it enables us to send that signal to Tasman that we don't expect them to instantly come to the party on the Economic Development Agency in equivalent their funding, but gradually phasing out. I don't feel strongly about it, and it is my intention to recommend the appointment of Councillor Stallard at the next council meeting, and I acknowledge his expertise and advocacy in these sorts of areas. And if council had a preference for his resolution, it's very much a judgment on the margin. I do have the view that we would retain the confidence of the Tasman Environment Trust with either the original proposal or with Councillor Stallard's amendment. Councillor Pakipaki, did you wish to exercise your right to speak? Would I be able to, I want to do the normal format after the mover and seconder to give the opportunity for Councillor Stallard to move his amendment.
Yeah, thanks, Mendy. So yeah, I'd like to move the amendment. That's where we're at.
You're going to second the amendment from Councillor Stallard? Thank you. Any discussion? Now we are debating